to order at 6:01. I have some additions. Under committee reports, I'm just going to do a quick update on the VSBA. And I have 3 executive sessions. And just so that administration can go home, I'm tucking them after unfinished business. And with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of 9/4.
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Oh, I did have one thing, I'm sorry. Barb sent me 2 corrections. This may be sort of more of a note of Bene than an actual correction, that the Dummerston clerk also had a problem with the date we were discussing.
Okay.
I know that 3 clerks were mentioned, but I don't think Dummerston was.
Okay.
But they wanted that added, and then I put someone's town of residence down wrong. So
Okay.
minor, but
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes as amended by Tim, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Welcome, visitors. If you are here to speak on a particular issue that is on the agenda, we will take comment before a board decision is made. If you are making comments on something that is not on the agenda, we're holding that to the end. The administrators, and we've lost board members who need to go home, and we need to have we're down 1 board member, so we need to have board members here to make decisions, so we will take comment at the end of the meeting. Moving on, their bathrooms are, if you go out this door, there's bathrooms and water fountains to the right. You have to go right down a hall. So communications, I sent everybody the communications. I apologize. There was another communication which was sent to everyone from Stuart McDermott with concerns about permanent rubber infill. Sorry, it was in my junk, so I didn't cut and paste it. So, were there any other communications other than what I forwarded in the packet yesterday? Excellent. We're moving right along. Moving on to committee reports. So, first committee report that we have is finance. We have not met since 9/4. I don't know if you want to talk about the warrants now and our plan, or if you want to do that when we get to warrants, Sean.
I think we do when we get to warrants.
Well, fair enough.
Yep.
I did not see minutes for personnel, so I'm thinking personnel has not met.
Personnel has not met.
Personnel, please meet. It's a contract negotiation year, so we have to get that up and running. So Policy and Amendment Committee met last week. We continued to work on the dog policy. Tim made some tweaks on that and sent around the tweaked copy to everyone last night at 10 o'clock. And so since people haven't had a long time to look at that, I'm wondering if maybe we want to table discussion on that and you can get back to the board. It was the tweaks that we had talked about, plus there was a few other...
I think I added the language about the allergies, is that it?
yes, we added, yes.
About notification.
Yep. And that parents would be informed when animals were going to be regularly scheduled in the classroom, so that families would be aware of that beforehand. And there was some discussion about proof of insurance as well as proof of a rabies vaccination. I have spoken to a veterinarian who also thinks it's wise to get a negative fecal test, whatever that is. But because they will probably be leaving fecal matter on the premises, it was recommended by the veterinarian that we consider including that. So if you have any thoughts about the dog policy, please let one of your policy committee members know. Yes.
I printed that off of the net today, so do you have a new copy, or will it be on the net tonight? Because I had a couple of questions on it.
Did Barb get that?
I did send it to her, I'm not sure if it's posted.
Uh,
It's included on that email.
I'll take the question.
And I should say, I'm Jody Nardo from Dummerston. Well, my question, I think you answered one of them about, I said that, you know, the dogs, should have their veterinary certificates with all their shots and everything. Because quite frankly, I have no problem with having pets in the school. We're bubble wrapping our kids far too much these days. So that was basically my the other one was, in reading this, it's my understanding, and also chickens, because our school raises chickens. It's my understanding that the principal can make all the decisions for all of those that are following here that you say otherwise are not allowed. So
I
it's
believe so, yeah, there's some that are not allowed, you can't bring
No,
like a wolf into the
not
classroom.
a wolf
even if the
or a
principal
bat
allows
or
it.
those, I understand that, but
Yeah.
a kitten or a chicken, or a chick or a dog that's got their rabies shot and everything, it's all up to the principal then.
There's some other, as we're talking about, there's some other, parents have to be notified that the animal will be in there. For example, if there's a guinea pig in my classroom, I'm going to be heavily medicated. And so that would be a consideration in a classroom if a child has an allergy to dogs, I would think, so.
What about the Putney case where the dog comes to school now every day with the principal?
So that's what we're working on with this policy. This is the challenge of the harmonized district, that,
I understand that.
that
but
we now
also-
have a $50 million pot that someone can sue if a dog bites someone. So we just need to make sure that there's insurance in place, that our policy is covering us, because before the Putney board could have made their decision, but now we're exposing this whole district to the liability if something happens, and a dog bite to a child can be about $500,000. So that's a significant liability. So we just need to make sure that we're covered from the liability standpoint, and that we're thinking about the benefits of all kids, such as allergies. So and we've taken this from policies across the state, so. And to be honest, most policies across the state are just like, yeah, no animals in the classroom, unless they're a certified wildlife trainer. So we're moving it far. I just want to be clear. We're not just going with what other communities are doing. We've put a lot of time into this policy to try to figure this out.
Animals are very beneficial to a lot of students in a lot of ways.
Moving along. We have moved forward with the facility use policy. We took out the language about teachers not being able to participate in their own school's activities based on advice from our attorney that Lyle got. So that is ready to go. We didn't have it ready to go in time for warning it for this meeting, so we will warn it for the next meeting. And we continue to work on the representation model, which continues to be far more involved because of the voting requirements. Our attorney is working with Will Senning, who hasn't called back, as far as we know at this point, to try to firm up the ballot language. There's been a lot of concern from the clerks about running an election all day, counting the votes all night, and then coming to Brattleboro to continue to count votes. And they're concerned about the accuracy of an election in that case. So we've kind of been pushing back on the attorney, and he thinks he's found a way that we can do that representation change and count the ballots in our individual districts, and then warn it from heretofore that we will count ballots in individual districts. So that's what he's thinking at this point, and we're waiting to hear back from him. We have an appointment to speak to him early next week, so hopefully he'll get in touch with the Secretary of State and make sure the Secretary of Elections, Senning, sorry. Sorry about that, Tim, I do it every time. To make sure that we can do that. So we're still moving forward with that, but it is not moving as quickly as we would like, because there's a lot more issues in running an election than we considered. And with that, the PPE, Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee.
We met last Wednesday. So we started off by re-looking at our mission, which we have in draft form, and the hope is that we would finalize that for next time, next meeting, and then the whole board could take a look at it. We all did a survey just as kind of a base process to figure out, one, what were our processes, how are we gonna manage the work? Do we have the right people? What's the capacity for goal setting and kind of where are we at?
Excuse me, Emily, can you speak up just a little bit?
Sorry.
Thanks.
So after that survey, which we kind of went through, we all filled out the survey and then went through and looked at what were a few things that stuck out to us, maybe things that we weren't ready to answer yet or that might make goals in the future, because I know eventually we'll be tasked with goal setting to figure out the equity piece across district and figure out what we'll be tracking across time. So what we decided is that one nice thing that we could do this fall is figure out what data exists. And then hopefully after we've heard from, I think Lyle had actually connected us to 4 folks in the district. After we have some presentations by those people, we can give a state of the kind of district to the board and maybe have some of those folks present out too. Then we would look at what goals specifically we want to set and track, maybe aligned with the improvement plans of the schools or some of the board goals that we came up with at our board retreat. And then we could hopefully, as the principals are giving us different measures throughout time when they're presenting to us, we could hear about those goals. So there's some kind of consistency across. We also talked a little bit about not only having our own internal goals, but hearing from the public. Things may come up as they did before with the after school care, which is still on our, we have an issue tracker now. So like, you know, as things come up, we can put it there and say, what are we doing to make progress on this? So that's still just in the basic stage, but it is on there. So the hope is as we meet with folks from across the district, we hear a little bit about what exists across the district. And then we can start to think about maybe some strategies that could make things, what opportunities exist, equitable. And then the board could have a conversation about that. But right now we're in a phase of just learning a little bit. And the hope is to share out so we don't kind of make any goals that we actually, you know, wish we had had more information beforehand. So I don't want to be preemptive. I think that pretty much sums it up for now.
Excellent, thank you, Emily. I know Thomas is not with us today, so is there somebody that wants to report out from the Environmental Sustainability Committee?
Yeah. We also had our first meeting and focused on scope and mission. What we're looking to do is develop recommendations for action on climate change that are within the purview of the district. What kinds of things, what kind of actions are, would make sense. We also decided we wanted to be open. We'd like to be open to participation of board members, administration, staff, parents, students, and community members. It wouldn't just be us, but we'd try and get a broader participation. Most of the conversation was how do we establish priorities, finding out what the community thinks, what goals we should set, and how to develop them, and finding goals for curricula, exploring educational opportunities. We talked about it. We talked some about goals and some about strategies, but really it was more of a trying to figure out why we were there and what we should be trying to undertake. And we'll be meeting every other week until we get that squared away.
And I saw that on the minutes there was some curriculum conversation at the last minute with Paul Smith.
Yeah, the question came up about educational opportunities that are science and opportunities to present science, and saying people aren't just exchanging views on what they think about climate change or any other environmental issues, sustainability issues. And the questions that we talked about were how is it being taught now? Where is it in this, just in the science curriculum? Where is information about climate change and thermodynamics and things like that being taught? And then where is argumentation happening? We have evidence-based argumentation, which we assume would be in the social studies and literacy programs. So we wanted to explore what's happening now and where.
Excellent, thank you. Communications.
We met after the last meeting and discussed sort of immediate projects to work on, one of which was the press release that I think Emily sent around, or sent to you and to Anne. And basically we were just doing goal setting. We'll meet again tomorrow.
Excellent. And let's see, the WSESU. Who wants to cover that?
How about Kelly?
Carrie?
Carrie.
So the WSESU convened for a reorganizational meeting, and we have retained Carrie Amadon, or re-elected her, as chair of the WSESU. I'm serving as vice chair. The representation is one representative from each town, and then, so there's 4 from the WSESD, and then 1 from Vernon. We have invited Walter to sit in on our finance committee, well, which is we're a committee of the whole for the finance committee now, since it's only a committee of 5 people. But since Walter was the former chair of the finance committee, he's offered to attend our finance committee meetings for the WSESU, which has its own $10 million budget, so it's a significant number of warrants to look at and things to consider. So we're very grateful, WSESD is very grateful that Walter is willing to come and sit with the group when we're going over warrants in an advisory capacity. We also approved all the legacy warrants from the districts that happened, that because the legacy districts stopped operating, but money was still spent, we had a huge stack of warrants to approve and no boards to approve it. So the WSESU board representatives that were sitting on a legacy board, signed for the documents, and the WSSU approved all those legacy warrants. And we also had a great presentation from the diversity committee, and they talked a little bit about their work. And no, that's not right. It's not the diversity committee, it's the diversity.
Equity and social
The
justice.
Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice.
Thank you. The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. We all got to try some Native American sumac tea, which is especially high in vitamin C, but I still have a cold. And heard a little bit about the work that they're starting off this year working on, because that's a new program that's been moved from the high school into the WSESU budget. And we've increased the position from 1 FTE to 1.5 full-time equivalent employees. Did I miss any high points?
Special ed staff. The special ed staff also talked about new
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go for it. My voice is...
The special ed and special ed administrators and the curriculum staff reported and talked about a lot of new students, especially at the middle and high school level. An overwhelming number of them have very complex needs. We've had transfers from Wyndham Central, from New Hampshire, and from Massachusetts that are attracted by the quality of the services. And the behavior and social emotional services are expanding in all the schools at this point. So we asked them to come back and at our next meeting and talk about Act 173, which is the new special ed law, which is absorbing most of the professional development activities of the district right now.
And I think the other piece about 173 that's important for the board to understand is that the reimbursement that they're talking about is a reimbursement on the basis of population. And so if you have some very high need students, it could be difficult. And so as we're attracting more high need students with this reimbursement model changing, it could be really challenging for us financially. The money has to come from somewhere. So I know the VSBA and Principals Association and Superintendents Association have put a lawsuit together against the state because it doesn't comply with all the parts of IDEA, the federal law on special education. So it's an ongoing moving target, but the state's moving forward, so it's something to keep an eye on and just understand that this might be a challenge for our board in the next year as 173 gets rolled in.
Jody Nardo again. Thank you. I read about these students coming in from Massachusetts and New Hampshire and from Wyndham Central. I shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming that if they're special needs, that their districts cover the special needs cost?
If they're residents of this district.
No, not if they're in Massachusetts or Wyndham Central, they're not. And I read that they were coming in. I don't know whether I read it on Vermont Digger today or in the newspaper,
I
but...
didn't read that, but maybe Lyle can address that.
So the students that we were speaking of at the WSESU meeting are students of families that have moved here specifically for services. So they're not the ones that we're talking about that are coming here through school choice. We have families moving to the area because we have great special education
So
services.
they're residents.
They're
But
residents.
what, the article made it seem like other people were tuitioning in.
There
from other
may
areas.
be some Dover students mostly.
This is Wyndham Central, they mentioned New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Yeah, I only know about the residents that have moved in, not those that are tuitioning.
But if they're coming, if you are going to do that, they have to cover the special needs cost, correct? Okay, thank you.
The article she mentions does call that there are people coming in. If you could give us at the next meeting, maybe population of incoming, that would be great, because then you can see, like, look at the variables, what we have here, because it's a great system. And I think that's, something really to.
Just a little point of order, if you could just raise your hand and state your name, and then I'll
Sure.
recognize
I'm sorry.
you, because
I
otherwise it's a
tried.
big room, so.
Kim Rock.
So
Yes.
can you just re-say, I missed the first part, so you're saying, how did the reimbursement change for the kids who have more significant disabilities?
Well, Frank could probably give you the more erudite explanation of 173 and the potential impact on our district. Do you feel comfortable doing that, Frank?
Sure, yeah, so it is all in kind of a developmental phase, the rulemaking phase, and the legislature's asked a task force to advise them on the implications of this transition. But the initial funding mechanism that has been described as the default, unless there are further changes, is the census-based funding. And as Christina mentioned, it is simply an amount of money times the number of students in the region, and it's a regular ed, total student population count. So on a very preliminary level, when we haven't been given an actual figure, that the state is saying, oh, we're going to appropriate this amount, but there's an estimated amount, and that appears that it could be $1 million less than what we're receiving now in special ed state aid. So that's a major concern as to how the system would be able to absorb that.
So they're basing it off when you say regular ed population, they're saying there's an average number of special ed students who would be in the population given the size of your population.
They're just saying the census-based distribution of special ed funding would be based on your regular ed population. Yeah. And as Christina mentioned, many of us, including the business managers and the superintendents, are saying you really need to consider need. It's about meeting student need. You need to consider poverty. You need to consider the proportion of students that are eligible for special education services when you make these funding decisions, a weighted funding system.
Thank you, Frank. Yes.
Perfect. I'm Tara Sullivan. Does that include also students who are on 504?
Tara, could you speak up a little bit for us?
Does that also include students who are on 504 disability plans?
It's all students, so the
those aren't special
funding, there
ed
is no distinguishing any type of student.
You're saying special ed kids though, and these kids aren't necessarily special ed kids, they just have physical needs, physical differences.
What we're talking about is the current special ed funding formula is based on specifically the costs associated with students with individual education plans. So,
IEPs?
yeah.
Okay, so it excludes students on 504 plans?
The current
Doesn't include
funding
them.
does, yes. The current funding, there is no funding in particular for 504 students. The new block grant is considering not capturing the costs associated with meeting a student's IEP needs, but just saying, here's a block grant times the number of kids in the entire system. And yeah, the difference is, we really don't have specific numbers, but we've been receiving nearly $6 million in special education funding. We're seeing preliminary numbers that would suggest maybe this would reduce that by $1 million.
Yes.
How many students
I'm sorry,
are
did
being
you-
paid for with the 504 or the IEPs as far as charter schools picking up the balance of these IEP students or the 504, students?
Could you just state your name for the,
Excuse me?
would you state your name?
Kevin Mills.
Thank you.
Sure.
You're on TV.
So what is the ratio as far as what is the other charter schools picking up any of these 504 or IEP students?
I can't speak to the charter school enrollments.
You don't have solid numbers then?
I don't receive
Okay, thanks.
private school numbers.
Yeah, sure.
So just, maybe somebody had actually asked for a percentage, I think, before, but I just wanted to clarify. So the percentage, so usually across the state, they'll say, okay, the average identification of special ed students is like, okay, 10% of the population. And then some districts will have 15% of the population, other districts will under-identify. Are we on kind of average identification, or is that what we're concerned about?
I think we're I don't know if you have an update, but I think the new enrollments, which we will see updates with very soon, are pushing us toward the higher end in terms of above state average, and I believe it's been nearly 15% of our student population. Now, statewide was 12% on average, so we've been a little higher. Yeah, we're concerned that our new enrollments are pushing us higher than that.
I think it'd be good to have it on the, I think it'd be great to have it on the SU agenda to sort of look at the special education and the budget and the lens, because that is the governance of special education is through the WSESU, so we keep it was great to have special education come and present, and I think we should keep on that because that is a significant portion of the SU budget. If there's anybody in the room that could help get that on the agenda, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Sarah Christine Putney. You mentioned that the current plan doesn't include 504s. So is the concern with additional funding being that the new plan will include 504s, IEPs, and there's another designation for special education students? Or is it just Apple referring to IEPs to IEPs?
What we're seeing as our concern is the overall funding system it looks like there's a cost shift where the local districts would be absorbing additional possibly $1 million. It's definitely not a number that we can, the Agency of Ed has not defined it for us, but that's the issue. It's that the whole system may be looking at a cost shift which will increase the local share, the local tax rate.
Ruby Macri from Putney. This might be really kind of a very basic question, but can you explain to me, both from what you're talking about now and why we're talking about WSESU stuff to budget time when our towns are voting, what does the WSESU cover and versus what you all here are doing?
I wish I have a very nice chart with a map and a graph and colors and everything. I wish I had brought it. So the WSESU is this governance arm, the WSESD, which manages the schools in Dummerston, Putney, Dummerston, Brattleboro, and Guilford. Vernon is a standalone district. Every district needs to have SU governance So we still maintain a supervisory union that provides central office services for curriculum and instruction support, and special ed moved up to, it used to be managed in each individual district a couple years ago, and it moved up to be managed in the supervisory union so that resources could be shifted throughout a supervisory union. The SU budget also pays for transportation, and what else am I?
Diversity, equity, and social justice.
Oh, yes, no, diversity, equity, and social justice. So there's various parts of our entire budget that are paid for through the governance arm of the WSESU, which has Vernon governance and WSESD governance. And so we pay back to the two districts now that are part of the WSESU, pay on a per student basis for all the costs involved with the administration, all the WSESU costs.
And so the budget that we vote on is inclusive of these WSESU costs.
Exactly. It's like one of the very big line items is assessment to the WSESU, and then that's a separate budget that is not voted on by the public at this point with our governance. But it's available, and you can scroll through the whole budget, and paper clips, from paper clips to to Lyle. You can, to the Lyle's office, you can see what the expenditures are for the WSESU. It is confusing. Okay, moving on to the Diversity and Equity Committee.
Okay, the Diversity and Equity Committee met at 5 o'clock this evening, and Dave has better notes because he was minuting. We received a report from the superintendent and from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice about the activities that have gone on within them. Attempts to recruit teachers of various backgrounds, not just what we have now, and plans for the first of our two diversity days, with one of which will be in November, the other is in the first Friday in May. And Michaela is organizing a Teach for Vermont job fair. We began working on our mission statement, and we have a recommendation to offer to the board.
For the mission statement?
No.
Oh.
For an actual thing for the board to do.
Have at it.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to commit to it because nobody's had a
Right.
chance to review.
Right, well, we didn't make the determination till tonight.
No, I
So,
gotcha.
no, we suggest the immediate or very soon placement of visible symbols of support for our marginalized students. The first thing that we have thought of is the rainbow flag. We'd like them to be placed centrally in all of our schools, probably in the lobbies. There are already some at UH6, which isn't 6 anymore.
Excellent.
I have a question.
Yes.
My name is Rudy, I'm in District 2. Will the rainbow flag also have a black and brown stripe on it?
We haven't discussed it yet, but when the full board discusses it, we certainly, I don't see any reason why not.
Thank you.
All set?
And Dave, do you have anything else from our minutes that?
Well, if you want to hear the things we talked about for the mission, but it'll be in the minutes, and then we have to, the board will have to approve it, but I'm happy to go through it.
I think I'm going to put that whole missioning, visioning thing onto our next meeting agenda because we have a pretty action-packed agenda. So while I love doing that stuff, I also like getting home by 10. So, the regional VSBA meeting was last night. We re-elected Dan MacArthur, the empty seat in the Wyndham region. The only nominee was Dan MacArthur, and he has been reappointed unanimously to serve another 2 years to represent our district. There are big changes the VSBA brought on by Act 46 because districts that used to be part of one SU are part of another, so they are revisioning the districts and the representation and making them a little bit closer to one person, one vote on a population. For example, Burlington had all of Burlington, Chittenden County, all of Burlington and South Burlington had 2 reps, and so did like Lamoille County with 3,000 people. So they've split Burlington in two and combined some other districts to come up with a slightly different representation. Their regional meeting will be November 7th and 8th at Lake Maury, so you can sign up for that if you want to go. I was appointed the voter for the bylaws and resolution changes, which you should have received notice of, but I think the VSBA does not have very accurate mailing list right now, so I'm offered to work on that for them. So if you want to attend and hear about changes in the bylaws, including the change of the regions, which has to pass by a 60% majority before that happens, you're welcome to attend, and I will make sure that this board has a chance to review the resolutions and tell me how you want me to vote as your district, as your regional representative. And Carrie is on it for Vernon, and Dan is reaching out to his neck of the woods, so that, well, I'm the SU representative here actually, so for our SU, it's just Carrie and the WSESD that we are voting on the resolutions, and I'm voting at the direction of my fellow board members between Vernon and WSESD. So I think there's 18 resolutions, and there's a recommend, pass, or fail. And I don't think there's anything too terribly controversial for our neck of the woods in terms of the recommendations of the board. So, should be a quiet read. We also went through the healthcare negotiations and got an update on that. One of the things the VSBA was concerned about is that it's been painted as a VSBA negotiating with the NEA. The VSBA is not negotiating for this. It was slipped into legislation, so the VSBA pays for the work, but the VSBA is not doing the work, which was kind of interesting. So the fact finder report, things did not move forward very smoothly, as things in healthcare probably often happen that way. And so the report went to fact finders, which came back yesterday, but it's confidential. They have 30 days to put their best offer forward, both the NEA and the school board negotiators. And then what is it called? The person who decides, the decider in the end.
The arbitrator?
The arbitrator, thank you. The arbitrator will pick one plan or the other. There's no horse trading. I want to take this from this plan. So it's either the NEA's plan or the school board plan. And that will, and how long it lasts. I said, how long does this last? We don't know. How long will we make it last? So, so we will know December 1st, but the good news is it's either going to be the NEA plan or the school board plan. So at least we have some idea of the possibilities and the cost sharing that might go into our budget for next year. So it'll just add a little more pressure to the business office this budgeting season. That will be a statewide plan, so, and I think they're hoping it lasts for 3 years, but that's still subject to the fact finder. And we also looked at the new snapshot, but which unfortunately the AOE had taken down. So we actually had to just do it on paper, which was maybe not the most effective demonstration, but their AOE has come out with a new way to sort of show you how your district is doing in terms of all kinds of metrics, not just looking at SBAC scores and things that we have before, teacher retention, long-term teacher stability, staff satisfaction with professional development, and it will show how your district is doing, how individual schools are doing. You can disaggregate it by population, but it's got a ways to go. So I think they'll have some of they're putting different metrics up. I think they're working on scores first, but I think by January they expect that all the metrics will be up for. We'll see if that happens, but ever hopeful. But they're targeting for that to be available in December, so it would be an interesting thing to play with when you're not reading warrants or having fun time reading policy discussions. Any questions from the board on VSBA?
All of the material they gave us last night will be available on the website.
Yeah, and it was on the, I just received this from the Vernon School Board Association, and they had that, what you just described. I thought it was kind of interesting. They didn't give a total number of public school students. They just gave each individual region. And so I added them up And it's 79,251 public school students in the state of Vermont.
Wow. We got a good chunk of those, don't we? Huh? If you look at it that way. Did you have a question, Jody?
Ann answered one of my questions. The other question is, do we have any idea what's in the school boards and the teachers, what's in their, each of their plans?
It's
secret?
confidential. Yeah, it wasn't enough of this at the meeting to try to get it out of them either, because one of the representatives, negotiators, was there. But it's strictly confidential what the fact finders report said and what they. Well, I mean, you kind of had some ideas about what the teachers preferred, but no, we don't actually know what was in there. I should also say that the current director, Nicole Mace, is leaving to go into law practice, so there is a hiring committee that is hoping to hire a new director of the VSBA by mid-October, and so that person will be able to shadow Nicole at the annual meeting and be up and running right after the annual meeting. Okay, moving on to approval of the warrants. Sean, you want to explain our thought on that tonight?
Yeah, actually, the warrants are listed on the agenda and also the payroll. But because we have not met, if it is agreeable with Frank, what we would do would be to wait until October 2nd until we have a meeting in order to go over the warrants and the payroll. Is that acceptable?
That would be fine, yeah.
Okay.
So we will table those warrants and we'll put them on the agenda for October 2nd then. Thank you. Okay, so we have administrative update, and as we are planning on doing for the first meetings at each location is get a little 20-25 minute walk around so that we can walk through the schools, meet the administrators, because this is a brand new gig for you and for us. So it's nice to have names and faces and give those administrators and teachers who work so hard to make our schools so fabulous an opportunity to showcase what they're doing here, and so that we can really understand the programming. But I think, Lyle, you had a few things before we take it away, right?
So before I introduce Kelly and John, you all received reports from all the schools. I want to make sure that you know that the numbers are greatly in flux because this is the start of the school year, and especially the free and reduced lunch numbers. Those will be more solid in the October report out. Just an FYI, Joe Rivers, middle school teacher, was featured on the Vermont Public Television program Made Here with one of his classes and the podcast that they do regarding Brattleboro history. And I've had a few calls from parents concerned about sidewalks and traffic around BUHS and BAMS. Today, Steve Perrin, Peter Elwell, town manager, and I walked around, looked at the crosswalks, looked at sidewalks, talked about some possible changes, upgrades. Peter is going to go back and work with Steve Barrett from the town crew, put together some ideas, and then be back in touch with Keith Lyman, principal at BAM, Steve Perrin, and myself with some ideas. To put in another sidewalk will be expensive. The town won't be able to afford that, possibly splitting the cost with the school, so that may be something we want to consider budgeting. But when you look at one of the crosswalks now, it's a crosswalk to no sidewalk, and that's what we're mainly looking at. Plus the Atwood Street where the sidewalk ends, but in the morning that's where BAM's kids walk to get to school, and there's no clear sidewalk or path for students to walk on. So those are the two areas that we are really focused on.
Thank you.
So, Academy School Principal Kelly Dias, Assistant Principal John Sessions. I'm going to turn it over to them.
Well, it's nice to meet you all. If I haven't met you, nice to see some familiar faces.
John and I have a short presentation prepared that will be on this screen, so since everybody is sitting now, I think it makes sense to start with that, and then we can do a tour. See how it looks, we might want to hit one light. There we go. All right, it was asleep for a little while. So, welcome to Academy School. You're currently sitting in our music room. I'm not sure what's going on with that. This is the room where music classes happen for grades 2 through 6. Band happens, band lessons, full band, and any plays that we have for the school. It's not quite big enough to hold our whole school at one time, so we do gatherings in the gym, which you'll see when we do the tour. But a little context. Our theme for this year is equity, access, rigor, and engagement for all kids. So what John and I wanted to share with you, we know we're keeping it brief, is just some of the new initiatives that we have going on this year and how it relates to our continuous improvement plan. Our core belief statement. We're currently working on developing a mission statement as well for the full staff. So you'll see that come out soon. So first goal of our continuous improvement plan, every school has one in the state of Vermont. So there's a district plan that relates to our school plan. So the first goal being safe and healthy schools. We really measure the success of our school every day by, is everybody safe? Is everybody happy? Is everybody healthy? We spend a lot of time thinking about basic needs and how we can meet them. Are they hungry? Are they clean? Did they sleep last night? So thinking about those, and then thinking about how can they access learning. So John, you want to take this one?
Sure. So one of our core goals contained in our continuous improvement plan is around student behavior, and so we'll get into some priorities that we've established this year to address student behavior, both in establishing sort of core expectations within our school, and then how we as a staff respond to instances of challenging behavior, and that sort of gets at our approach to discipline system in our school, and things like that has really emerged as a priority for us as a school system, as a school. You'll see around our building and in our lobby that was painted by our art teacher. I don't know if you noticed when you came in, there's sort of a new sort of space astronaut theme that is new this year. That's all part of our universal behavior expectations. And so that's just establishing a core understanding throughout our building of what we expect from students. And that is essentially be safe, be kind, be responsible, and be respectful, essentially. Is sort of our core universal belief. And so we've worked with our classroom teachers to really spend a lot of time this year, really sort of establishing that classroom community and reinforcing some of those expectations and teaching that behavior in all contexts throughout the building. and taken the time to really establish that. Yeah.
How many direct support staff do you have that are addressing these students that are, accessing, better models of behavior?
Yeah, that are specifically designed to support students who...
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, how many pairs do you have? How many, one-on-ones, whatever?
Yeah, so within the context of our building, we have 21 classrooms, right? So we have 3 classrooms per grade level. We have roughly 15 paraeducators that support within those classrooms. We also have 1 full-time planning room coordinator who's sort of a positive behavior plan person that supports all students throughout the building. And then for those students that need a higher level of behavior support, we have our Supportive Teams for Educational Progress program, called the STEP program, which has 7 staff dedicated to it. Their goal is to support behavior within the building to a pretty high level.
And do you feel like that's enough, or do you need more? I mean, what?
Yeah, no, that's
Your
really
perception.
Good.
I mean,
yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think I speak for Kelly when I say that we feel pretty good about where we're at behaviorally and where we're headed. One of our core priorities that we've established over the last 2 years, really last year and into this year, is a restorative approach to discipline. And we've seen a pretty dramatic impact on our student behavior within the building and how we respond to student behavior. And I feel like we're adequately resourced to be able to do that in a really positive, productive, proactive way. I have a couple slides ahead. You'll see some of our data that I used to sort of touch on that. But yeah, good question.
I think too, it's important to remember that something like this is really the responsibility of every single staff member in the building. So every morning, I go to a different classroom and some students help me read the pledge over the PA. So that's one way that we're making our rounds to make sure that everybody knows what's expected. We also have what we're calling the wellness team, and that will come up a little bit later too, but that is comprised of the nurse, the family engagement and education coordinator, special ed, counseling. So all of these people pooling together to think about a wraparound way to support kids.
So the school-wide pledge, can we have a short synopsis of what the school-wide pledge, because I grew up with the Pledge of Allegiance, but I mean, I'm just saying, I'm okay with it. I just wanted to know what the pledge was.
So I'm just going to ask, because they only have about 20 minutes to do this whole presentation.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was a question. I didn't know.
So,
sorry.
Yeah, if there's a point of clarification or whatever. No worries. If there's a point of clarification, but I just don't want to take up their time for their presentation.
I'd like to know what the school-wide pledges do.
Yeah, so we have 5 character traits that are in this pledge. It's a very short pledge. Vernon School does one too, which is why I got the idea, because I used to teach at Vernon. So it basically just says, I am an Academy star, I'm responsible for my own behavior, I will strive for excellence, things like that. And I could get a copy pulled up.
Mentions responsibility, community, things like that. So that we hold core.
And we do the Pledge of Allegiance once a week at all schools. Yeah, got it. Okay. So on the next level, what you were referring to, students who might need a little bit more than a universal approach. We have the planning room, as John mentioned. We have staff available for a check-in, check-out in the morning, at lunchtime, before the end of the day. We have STEP services. We've also spent quite a bit of time refining our educational support team process, or EST, as you'll hear it called. And one of our staff members, our HCRS clinician, Lori Macy, owns a dog named Soxy. And she is a certified Vermont family therapy dog. And she comes once or twice per week. She sees kids individually and she goes into classrooms. She was here today. And if you're interested, we have a photo album over there that I'll pass out after that shows what she does with all the kids. But it's pretty phenomenal. Reluctant readers want to read to Soxy. Kids who are being questioned by ECF can have Soxy sit in with them.
there's a lot of comfort and joy that she brings. So it's really been special for us because she doesn't go to any other school. She belongs to us. We all feel that she's our dog.
So, as I mentioned, you know, one of the initiatives that I'm most excited about, that we've really spent a lot of time and energy in establishing, is restorative practices and restorative approaches to discipline. And so Kelly and I both started in our roles last year. And one of the things that we noticed was that in the 2017-18 school year, there were 455 behavior referrals within our building and 31 days of suspension, which is a lot. That's an average of between 2 and 3 behavior referrals a day. And what we noticed is that it was the same students engaging in habitual behavior over and over again. And so behavior was not changing. And so last year we spent a lot of time, and we assembled a committee of dedicated teachers and staff within the building to spend a lot of time researching restorative practices in our classrooms and restorative approaches to discipline in school. And so that looked like connecting with other schools around Vermont and around the country who have engaged restorative practices in discipline. You know, I was talking with principals from around the country and looking at different classroom models and things like that, and really engaging in the literature and the research that's out there. And this year we've really sort of taken a big dive in terms of our discipline system and taken a restorative approach rather than a strictly punitive approach in how we address challenging behavior. Here's a couple of things that we do every day that is a part of that. We're engaged in training our student leaders and staff to facilitate restorative circles. So in instances of challenging behavior, we sit together, and those students who are impacted by the behavior sit with the person who committed the behavior, and we talk about it, and it's incredibly powerful to witness. And we're training our student leadership teams, our 5th grade leadership team, as well as our student senators, who are 4th and 5th graders, to facilitate some of that work, which is, again, a very powerful experience for me to witness some of those things. We focused on distributing accountability to those impacted by behavior. So I noticed that when a student engages in some challenging behavior, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to be accountable to me as the assistant principal, right? They're accountable to those who are impacted by the behavior, and sort of having that shift school-wide. We talk a lot about apologizing with action and thinking about ways to repair damage that's been done to our community, things like that. And something that we've really sort of focused on in the past year is identifying positive peer supports. So for those habitual students who continue to come up in behavior referrals, having them identify peers who can be positive supports for them within the classroom has been a really led to some pretty remarkable behavior change. Just as an anecdote, just a story from this week. So on Monday, this is sort of restorative practices in action, in my opinion. There was a referral made to me of 2 students who were throwing food in our cafeteria. And so in a traditional model of discipline, that would have come to an administrator. Consequence likely would have been a couple days out of the cafeteria for lunch. They'd be eating by themselves in a separate spot. But we took the approach of sort of holding a circle and with those students that were throwing food and generating a list of all the people that were impacted by that behavior. And we came up with a list of the kitchen employees who made their food, right, who spent their morning preparing that food that they were throwing in the cafeteria. The custodians who had to clean up the food, and their class who saw them throw food, right, and all of those people were impacted. And we went around and we talked to every one of those people. And these students made snack for the cafeteria employees who had made their food that they'd thrown. Apologized to all the custodians and helped them sort of clean up other things throughout the building and apologize to the class. And it's a pretty powerful experience. And so that's how we sort of capture restorative practices within our building. here's a couple pieces of data that I just pulled, and so we constantly reference data to see if what we're doing is effective. And so you see the graph on the left is just average behavior referrals per day, longitudinally. So, you know, dating back to 2016, 2017, and you see last year we saw a decline in behavior referrals per day, and to about 2. And this year, you know, as of today, we had 8 over 15 days of school, which is I think, a pretty profound drop. Last year versus this year, at this point in the year, 30 behavior referrals over the first 13 days of school versus, again, 8 this year, which is pretty profound. And there's many factors. I think one of those factors is how we're approaching behavior and discipline in our school. And one of the most important pieces for me is suspension. We do not like to suspend kids. That's a very hard message to give to students, that you're not welcome in school that day. And so, you know, again, a really important piece of data for us is seeing a decline in time outside of school based on behavior. And so we saw a pretty significant reduction last year, and this year it's early, but we're at 0. So something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about as a school, and something that we're pretty excited about as administrators. Is that piece?
So one piece that kind of delves off of that is how we've decided to use teacher leaders this year. I know the board has asked us in the past to talk about how we use our teacher leaders. So John and I sat down this summer and really thought about what do we need. In the past, teacher leaders have run PLCs, committees, they have led professional development at staff meetings. They're always working, they're always meeting with each other, they're meeting with us, but there was some need for clarity among the whole staff in terms of what they do and why they do it. So we decided to take it back to our continuous improvement plan and loop it into 2 goals. So one way that we're going to use teacher leader is to have recess engagement specialists. So those people will help us reduce behavior referrals and increase engagement on the playground. Almost 50% of our behavior referrals were happening at lunch recess on the playground. That's pretty common. There's a lot of opportunity, it's unstructured, there's a lot of close physical contact, things happen outside. So these people will be researching recess and playground strategies and how to engage kids. What we're finding more and more is they're coming to kindergarten and 1st grade and they don't know how to play. They need us to teach them how to play. We'd like them to lead some recess activities, some structured games, whether it's tag, whether it's something more sophisticated. We also have a natural playground, so teaching kids how to climb safely, how to jump down safely. Things like that they may not have experienced before they've come to school. We've also asked them to develop some staff training. So for staff meeting time, we'd like to build a resource library and have them teach us about their findings and meet with John and I on a regular basis to report out. So we're really excited about that. The next one is more about wellness and how we coordinate our approach. So I mentioned the wellness team. Weekly, we have a meeting with the counselor, the family engagement and education coordinator, the HCRS clinician, STEP services, which is our VSBA and our special educator, the nurse, and administration. So we both try to be there, but at least one of us will be there if we can. And the purpose of this is instead of going to an educational support team meeting, say, oh, hey, this child needs a reading intervention, and oh, every time math comes around, they're hiding under the table. What's up with that? We're now referring it back to the wellness team, and we can have a wraparound and say, okay, maybe they need to check in with the counselor. Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe they're hungry at that time of day and they just need a snack. Maybe they need a tutor. Maybe they need, you know, all these things, A, B, C, D. And then we can refer it back to the EST team, make a plan, check more fluidly for progress.
So another one of our continuous improvement goals that goes with the distributed leadership is to increase the number of students who score at proficiency for math and reading, as measured by the SBAC. SBAC is taken for grades 3 through 6. So this is the other way we've decided to use our teacher leaders. We're asking for 7 people, 1 from each grade level, K through 6, to become a case manager and a data analyst. So what they will do is they'll coordinate grade level kid talks, which are monthly in team meetings. So each grade level team meets and they go through a protocol, a very specific protocol to talk about students, their achievement, what they might need, interventions. They'll compile and bring data to EST meetings, which happen as they're referred. They'll help to develop student-specific goals and actionable steps. One thing we found was that we really needed more clear, actionable steps out of these meetings. And communicate with all stakeholders. Bring in the parents, make sure that they can come to the meeting, make sure they know what we're doing to measure progress, and all of the staff who are involved with the student, which, as you can see, could be a lot. So they're really in charge of maintaining that plan, measuring progress, bringing it back to the team, bringing it to us.
Do you do this for every student in your school, or?
This is for all students who are brought to the educational support team meetings. And also on a grade level team basis, they'll be, the purpose of Kid Talk is to prevent EST, the need for EST. So sometimes when you've got 4 or 5 people all together, you can brainstorm and say, oh, have you tried this? Oh, good idea, let me try that before I make the referral. We're almost to the end. We're pretty excited about our professional development for the year with Judy Maynard. She's done a lot of work throughout Vermont and in our district. She's sort of an MTSS expert, that stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports. Our goal as a school is to create a highly collaborative professional school culture. In order to do that, we all need to be on the same page in terms of what we're doing every day with our students. So Judy's helping us with that. She came in August and she'll be back in November for 2 days. And she's helping us with things like Act 173, how to differentiate for all levels of learners, how to be really inclusive and proactive. And this is our favorite part, and we're a little bit sad that it's dark, so we can't take you to the forest. But we spend a lot of time out in our forest. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So out behind our building, actually stretching all the way up to Memorial Park, really is about 200 acres of beautiful forested land that is owned by the Smith Lang family, and they generously grant us seemingly unlimited use and take us out to walk trails all the way up and down. And it's really a remarkable gift to our school community that they provide us. And we have classes who are in the woods daily. The woods area is really full. It provides a remarkable learning opportunity for students. You know, last week I was out there one day and there were 6th graders huddled around a campfire who had just read the book Hatchet, you know, which talked about starting fire right in the cave, and so they started a fire and they were reading around this fire in the woods. And I said, how many of you have ever sat around a campfire before? Right, and 5 of them raised their hands. And simultaneously a group of 3rd graders is writing poetry along a stream that goes right through the area, and then a kindergarten group are building forts back in this other area of the woods, and it's a phenomenal resource for a school community, and something that we really treasure, the opportunity to learn outside the building. And it's really, our teachers have done a phenomenal job sort of incorporating it into their academic work in the classroom. It's great. One of our kindergarten classrooms is in the forest all day, every Thursday, rain or shine. They all have rain suits and rain boots, and then they're like little bobs of color floating away out there. It's great. Last year we built a shelter out there, a sort of 3-sided shelter. It's really becoming an increasingly big part of what we do here. something that we really value quite a bit.
And you'll never guess how many behavior referrals come out of the forest.
And one nice thing.
Teamwork, the
one-
collaboration
yeah.
between kids who never
Yeah.
would socialize in the school
Yeah.
is huge.
And this year, we made the decision to open that up as part of our playground. So that area is supervised and open during recess, which it's really neat to see, to go out there and see kids, building forts and structures and working together in a really sweet, great way. It's really powerful.
You could see a little bit of the shelter. And the very last thing is a short poem that John captured by a third grader. He wrote outside.
I like being in the woods. It is cool when the birds go tweet, tweet. I hear a stream going swoosh, swoosh. And when people walk, it makes a crunching sound. All the trees are crooked straight. All the stones are large and tiny, with moss swirled across in sheets. It makes a nice sound when the water trickles in.
So I know we're on a very short time limit. Happy to entertain questions, or you could, send them to us for next time. And do you want to do a building tour, or do you want to just move on?
I'm thinking, we'll be back.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do a building tour, especially as we're looking towards budgeting season and figuring out what the academy school needs are.
Okay.
That way have a better chance at remembering it than
Sounds great.
what academy looks like in our whirlwind tours. Thank you so much for that presentation. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. So Tim sent along the updated facility use policy. We're still waiting for the, it's not top of the list, but at some point we're going to have the costs for building use. And per school, it's going to vary per school. The cost of opening up the high school auditorium is going to be different than opening up the Dummerston Auditorium. So, but that isn't top on the list of administrators the first couple weeks of September. We made the tweaks on that policy, and Tim has sent that around. So if you have concerns or thoughts about that policy, please get back to the committee. We'll be meeting next week. So we can incorporate any positive. I hope to warn it for approval for next week so that we can move forward with that language that will make it clear that when people are using the building, it is not a school-sponsored activity. Animal policy as well. Moving forward with that, the committee has taken the policies from around the state, talked to veterinarians and lawyers, and feel pretty comfortable about this. There may be some tweaks, but let us know what you think of the animal policy. And thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, for doing all that editing to make it a much more readable policy. Any questions on that? Moving on to the turf motion, tabled from the 8-7 meeting. And I apologize because I had thought we had finished that motion and then went back and looked and we had not. So the main amendment, the main motion was to have the RFPs include natural grass crumb rubber infill with a synthetic turf, as well as alternatives to crumb rubber in the synthetic surface. So three different options for the RFP. There was a failed amendment to strike natural grass wording from the motion, and then immediately an amendment was made to include researching the purchase or lease of Famolari Field on a long-term basis, at which point we tabled the motion because it was getting late. So the motion on the table right now is to amend the motion to include researching the purchase lease of Famolari Field, and I believe that was David's motion. And I don't know if we had a second for that motion. I couldn't tell.
Well, we don't need one anyway.
So we'll need a second on that motion if we're going to discuss that motion.
We adopted the Robert's rules for small boards. And we'll do a second.
I like a second, so I don't
Okay.
have to do a
That's
second,
fine.
but if nobody wants to talk about it, then we can,
I'll second it.
thank you, Emily. So the one thing I'm going to say about this is it doesn't seem germane to an RFP motion, because an RFP wouldn't really, an RFP that's going out to synthetic field or natural grass, I don't think a purchase of a field is particularly germane to that motion. So do you want to amend your motion maybe in some way, or?
Research the costs, various options and costs of securing Familari Field and upgrading the facilities.
Do you have that?
Not entirely. Say it again.
Research the cost of long-term, for securing Familari Field long-term, and the cost of upgrading the facilities.
I'm going to just go to the board first, and then so any questions from the board? Thoughts? Good, it's a quiet board tonight. So now I'll put it out to the public. So if you could just state your name so that...
Yeah, my name is Jeff Stent. I live in Brattleboro. And didn't we vote on this twice already?
So there was a vote, this board has not voted on this.
No, but before this board came in. This was voted on twice in the past twice.
Were there 2 votes on it? I'm not aware of that. You're talking about a board that I did not sit on.
Well, it was. Well, it did pass, right? Am I?
Yes.
June
Yes.
June 12th, the Brattleboro Union High School District had a public meeting, and it was 2 articles. And the second article was specifically, shall the voters approve the turf field improvement, and it was approved.
It was approved.
Right, so that's one, I didn't know there were 2 votes, so I'm not aware of 2 votes for this, so.
So there was one.
Okay.
I'm looking at the Wyndham Southeast Unified Union School District Articles of Agreement. And under Article 5B, it states that the new union district shall apply all reserve fund for the fund-specific purpose, if identified, unless otherwise determined through appropriate legal procedures. So, have there been other appropriate legal procedures to amend this, to overturn this decision?
We are not surfacing the field. We're requesting RFPs for various methods of resurfacing, and we have not taken off synthetic
Wasn't there was
resurfacing.
money though allocated? There was a certain amount of money. But it was, and it was an argument about synthetic versus. I mean, there was. I mean, it went to the debates. It was I could argue either side of it, but you can't. But yeah, according to this, you have to put the funds where they were going to go.
Right, so we're talking about how would we resurface a field. It may be that the voters vote because we could get Familari for free. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going down that path. We're really just talking about Familari. Maybe we do that with other funds while we're considering this.
These funds, though, are allocated for that purpose, and you can't amend that according to Article 14. You can't amend that. That's where it's got to go.
So we're talking about the main motion on the table, which is not what we're talking about now, is resurfacing the field, but we're not talking about that motion. We're talking about researching Familari Field, and it wouldn't negate the main motion. It's an addition to the other motion. So we're talking about possibly researching Familari Field, which does not negate the main motion at all. We're not considering, the main motion includes RFPs for doing the work to resurface the field.
Okay.
So, but the motion on the table right now is whether we consider other, maybe additional options, what our long-term plan is, and make sure we've turned over every stone on every field to make sure we're looking at our options. That's the motion on the table right now. So how many people want to speak to this, just so I know ahead of time, because keep your hands up. Sorry, there's hands going up and down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So I feel very good with about 2 minutes if you can do it. And if you need to go longer, let me know. And Sean.
I will time 2 minutes and I'll just hold up 2. If you go beyond, I'll continue to raise fingers.
Which finger, Sean?
Question, point of order though.
Yes, yes.
Kim Price from Brattleboro. Are we allowed to talk about the turf field, or are we only talking about this amendment right now?
This amendment on the table is Farmland Field, not the turf. We're down.
Then you need to make that clear, because people want to talk about the turf field, not this amendment right now.
Right, I thought I explained that the amendment on the table right now is just to add Farmland Field. That is the amendment, that's the amendment to the main motion, was the Farmland Field amendment. I'm sorry that was not clear, I thought I clarified that. Steve?
So, Steve Perrin, Brattleboro Union High School principal. I did do some research on Familari Field, and I did talk to the current owners. Right now, it is not on the market. So, you know, at this point, it is not for sale. The building's north of the grounds. The owner is going to talk to her family, but at this point, you know, it's not an option because it's not on the market yet. It wasn't on the market, they pulled it off.
Okay.
And, you know, when they know more, they're going to contact me.
So, given that,
Well, no reason to see how much it costs. We already know it's not for sale.
not for sale.
Yeah.
So, do you want to withdraw your?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Tim Macy of Brattleboro. The principal parent looked into the possibility of buying it, but I didn't hear that he looked into the possibility of leasing it.
No, I did not, because I was asked by the board to look at the possibility of purchase, and that's what I did.
Okay. And leasing is another option.
Me?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Jody Norman from Evanston. I understand the frustration with the fields, and I don't want to get into that, but I am really pushing the board to talk to the Familari family, and not anybody with a vested interest in it. What has been on the market, and it may come back on the market. As I said at the past meeting, you know, if we control that land, if we could own it, we control it. Other than that, that land may get sold in changing hands, and we would never have an opportunity to do that. I wish David would keep his amendment in play so that you can at least talk to them. I think there are people in the audience who know the family, and I know people who know the family. I don't think it's my position to talk to them, but I think we need to find out if there is any possibility there, and not just throw it out tonight.
I believe I'm sorry, that's what I said. I said the family's going to contact me when they talk to each other, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, he was having something.
Yeah, Jeff Brewer, I'm here representing the Brattleboro Youth Soccer Program. I don't know about the first thing I did when I bought my house was I ripped out all the old carpet because it was toxic and it was nasty. So I don't know how many people follow this, but the idea of putting more artificial products in this world, and somewhere the recycling product has to come and create this field. So I'm certainly want to just make my point that football and soccer is a true.
We're actually, though, we're on the Familari Field amendment, so that would really fall under the turf, so.
Right. I know Familari Field was available years ago, and the school turned it down, and I work with Phil Nadowich, and I learned a lot from what we didn't do, and now we're reeling from not having enough space, so, you know.
So just on the Familari motion. Sorry, I called them Jill, then Kim, sorry.
Jill Stahl, Tyler, Brattleboro. Just wondering if someone can clarify exactly what our agreement is with Familari right now, because we obviously are using those fields.
Sure. May I? So currently, we have a very generous lease agreement with Familari that we can use it for middle school and sub-varsity sports, with an eye towards using it for girls' sports in particular. And you know, currently we have one field on there and that we maintain. In recent years, they put up a solar farm and they've also put a hemp garden or a hemp farm in part of that. So, they're expanding their use of it as well. In terms of what it would look like, and I can't even begin to speculate what an engineering study would look like to renovate that to be the field that we need. Right now, we do have issues with parking. We're not allowed to park up there. It is off-site, so for our athletic trainer to get there, and if there's an injury, there's a delay there as well. So our preference is to have everybody on campus if we can. But the short answer is we lease it for a very attractive price for the fall sports, for cross-country in the winter, and then spring sports.
And then a clarification question. And so if we were to purchase this land, we wouldn't just start using it for games and suddenly be able to?
No.
It would take some money.
A lot of work. It would take we'd have to look and kind of determine what kind of field space do we want. Again, I'm not a geologist, so I don't know the details, but I'm sure it would take some considerable excavation to make enough flat surfaces to get enough playing field out of that. And again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mine was along similar lines, but if it's to be used instead of a turf field, Familari, what's the cost of lighting? Because you need to offer the lights for night games. You need to have facilities put in for using the bathroom. You need to have parking. What's the cost of all of that? And if you can put lights because you have houses right there next door, and that's why we can't have lights in the softball field. So the cost to try to do the Familari seems extravagant.
On Familari.
Yes. Yeah, Sarah Gagnon from Brattleboro. I guess I just have a question, David. Is your motion to purchase or look at leasing the Familari field in place of doing the turf field?
It's an option.
And what does that mean, though? An
That
option
means
for
that
what?
what we're going to have to decide at some point is, can we afford it? Is it going to be more efficient and less costly to have a turf field than what we're doing now? Because cost is obviously a consideration. And we need to look at, is this going to have a health impact on students or not? Those are the questions we're going to have to answer. If it turns out that the turf field is less costly, is more efficient, and we have a definitive sense of, or at least a preponderance of an understanding of what the health effects are, then the turf field answers the need that the administration prepared. If those two things aren't, if it's more expensive and if there are health issues, we want to give them what they need as far as we can afford. But so we want to have options. We don't want to just say yes or no. Let's see if we can solve this problem a different way if that doesn't work.
You could just address the question. I'll let you do a quick follow-up because you were very quick, but just address the question to me.
So what would be the timeline? Like, how long would you take to investigate this, both the health risks and the costs?
So we don't even, we're waiting, when do you think we're going to get the RFPs back that you've already started to work on?
We're ready to share estimates. We can't do an RFP without an engineering study to take place, but Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Clark have been working very diligently, and they've researched the options that you asked in August, and they're ready to present those this evening.
Oh, that's news.
They're not formal RFPs.
Okay.
They are estimates, based on conversations with vendors.
Okay, let me get through the Familari motion. I can move back up to we're way down in the motions, moving back up to the top. You guys are giving me this challenge. Is there anybody else that wants to speak to the Familari motion who has not spoken?
Just briefly, Evan Chadwick from Brattleboro. What Mr. Stent said is it sounded like, Mr. Schultz, you were kind of leaving the option over of a replacement as opposed to in addition to the turf field that has already been approved. But as Mr. Stent said, and I agree with him, I think that ship has already sailed with regards to the approval of the turf field. The question is exactly what that looks like, but it sounds like this has been voted on and approved, and there's really no way to look at alternatives. There's just a mechanism to allow you to look at in addition to.
Can I respond to that? Yeah. I think if you look at the motion, you'll find that what was approved was borrowing money to do it. And the money has not been set aside, it hasn't been identified or contracted or in any way committed to that project. And the board that made that decision was, if you trust the judgment of the Agency of Education, none of the school boards really had the authority to make that decision, if you want to go in that direction. But we are now faced with this issue. We are the ones that have to figure out if it's the right thing for the students, if it's the right thing for the community, and if we can afford it. And the fact that the money was the approval of borrowing the money if you decide to go forward with that was approved by that meeting doesn't tie our hands.
Can I ask a question about?
Is this a point of clarification, or?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
Tara Sullivan. So there were, I understand, $4 million or something in funds that have been voted toward projects, right? Including this field? Like
No.
this school is getting a new,
Yes.
like the outside classroom is getting replaced, there's some money toward that.
Those funds have not been allocated. Those
Okay, so
conversations have been had, but no board with authority has authorized.
So we
any-
have to revisit all of those votes on all of that $4 million of capital spending?
I'm not sure what the 4 million is, but we never had a vote on the expansion of Sierra Academy.
Okay, so we're gonna have to vote on everything again? We're gonna have to vote on this academy thing again?
We never voted on the academy thing, Carl.
Isn't there money put toward taking down this outside classroom?
So this is way beyond the Famulari motion, this is really moved into a
makes-
philosophical.
but
I understand, Tara. I
It's
just.
not philosophical, I'm just
Well,
asking a clarification.
Um,
Like, we're putting out these,
So the motion to look at Famulari is to look at another option and how we might consider that option, or if it's even an option, it's just to get data. Maybe they give it to us for nothing, and maybe it would be nothing, and everybody at BUHS would say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're looking for
Are we
data.
looking at everything? I'm just trying to understand the new board and the old board and how they're coming together and what's new and what's different and what, are we gonna look at every single thing? What are we gonna look at? Including this field, right? Do we have to go back in all of these cases of where we?
You know, I think we have to take things, I mean, Putney needed a new teacher. They approved a budget without a teacher and they needed a teacher. So boom, there's another teacher. So it's a constantly evolving.
But did this board have to review whether we're gonna hire that new teacher for Putney?
Yes, we had to say, go ahead and hire the teacher, yeah.
So we have to go through every single thing that's coming up
I
as a
mean,
new board, that's what the new board has to do.
when we approve a budget, when something lands in a budget, yes, then it has to be approved for the next time. So if there's going to be an expansion of academy, that will have to go in a budget that gets approved before the voters, and if it
Okay,
gets
so the
struck down.
idea was approved, but the money wasn't.
As far as I know, I was not on the Brattleboro board, so I can't speak to that, but I don't believe that money was expended for the expansion of academy. Is that correct?
So the Brattleboro Town School Board, as we have on the website, is the board approved in December during the budget development. So the Brattleboro Town School Board approved a 5-year capital plan. And in that plan, it did identify the academy project. The board did authorize the engineering and the architectural services, the preliminary permitting. That's actually well underway. I think, is Kelly still here yet? The capital plan identifies a number of projects across all of our schools, and as of June 30th, certain things were approved. So in the academy expansion example, the design of the project was approved. That's probably a $30,000 cost. In the example of the Brattleboro Union High School, but not only did the board approve the turf field expansion, but so did the public. The electorate voted on that. So those are, they're similar, but the Brattleboro Union High School vote is all the way down through the legal process. And I do think that Jeff's point speaks to that, whereas as David is clarifying, there was no vote on moving forward with a construction bid process for the addition. The project was contemplated, so it is in process, but it's a little different. But I would just say another sort of thing that most folks would recognize immediately, and this is again is what this Article 5 does, is if there were endowment funds with a restricted purpose, that Article 5 was there to say that any reserve fund that was designated prior to the merger will be honored. So, you know, the restrictions that go with funding, and then you have to get into the, well, I think somebody mentioned, I think maybe it was David, you know, there's the idea of doing something, and then there's the funding. Article 5 speaks to if there's funding available, then there was a commitment and there were the resources available to do it. And Article 5 is basically saying you should follow through with that. But it's not saying just because on the website there's a $4 million plan for all of the projects at Brattleboro Union High School for the next 5 years, you know, this board is obliged to do that. That's not what, you know,
That was my question. Thank you.
I think I will say that this board has more than we can do, so we're generally going with what the good work of the previous board members, many who are in this room, have recommended. You know, I mean, we're not reinventing every wheel throughout the district. We cannot possibly do that. And so we have competent administrators and we had competent board members in place. So you know, I think we're looking at maybe some tweaks along the way and making sure we have funding. And if we lose $1 million in special ed funding, we got real problems. I don't know what we're gonna, you know, that's a real challenge that we'll need to respond to because we can't now respond to students with special needs. So, and it's a merged board. So we have to consider all the students in 10 schools. So that's where we might be revisiting things that we have considered if we don't have the money and we're at the cap. Famolari Field, but thank you for the philosophical path one. Thank you, Frank. Is there anybody else who hadn't spoken at all, Jill? And I'll give you a second shot. Yes.
Brian Crowder. Just wondering if David's RFP or amendment to the RFP should be held as something totally separate so that they can put out the current RFP for the turf field, not to hold that up, because this process is going to take quite a while, so that they can move that along while you research that.
It's an interesting amendment. Do you want to consider, I mean, I don't think.
I think the object of the amendment is so that we have as many options as we possibly can. I mean, when we see what they've got for estimates and then we put out an actual proposal to see what this would cost, there's a lot of time in between there to explore what's available at Famolari Field. And I think one of the things that you didn't mention, Kim, was that they also needed changing spaces up there, so the kids don't have to go into the woods. That's part of the consideration. So, and that's what I'm asking, is let's find out what that really amounts to, and then we'll look at the options and see what's going to best satisfy the need that the administrators have identified.
I wouldn't expect that it would hold up any work we're doing on RFP getting.
But if you're attaching to that RFP, you're waiting for numbers that could take months. We're saying that RFP on turf field, it sounds like they got pretty close numbers.
Well, just for a point of, just to make it more clear, would you like to make that as a separate motion?
Well, the intention isn't to hold up the RFP, so
Right.
I'd just leave it the way it is.
So,
But would you be able to review the RFP until questions on his amendment or answer?
this has been moving forward, and we haven't actually even asked them to get the RFP yet, and they've actually have estimates for us, so I don't think we're not stopping anything from moving forward. We have not as yet. We're still moving forward the administration is still moving forward, and this is sort of a pro forma.
The award of the project.
So I can't.
Could hold up the award of the project.
It could, yeah.
I think it'll be a pretty quick conversation to find out if it's even feasible. And then we'd have to revisit what we're going to do in terms of moving forward with the project. But I wouldn't expect we would hold up anything. Yes. Jill, I'm going to let you go because I keep calling on you, so I feel.
Well, I'm trying to understand. I think I get, David, where you're coming from on the amendment, but I'm also thinking that it was this whole project is, if I understand, is at least 10 years in the process of being evaluated and being researched. So the wording of the amendment of saying, you know, it feels like the administrators have already done much of the work that you're stating in your amendment. I'm wondering if you're trying to get at something else when you say that, or if you want to be a little bit clearer. Because I mean, I know, you know, that there's a lot of work that's been done to get to this point on any project by the time it gets to this level.
Yeah, I think the information that we got is it might cost $1 million, it might cost $1.5 million, it might have to be replaced in 8 years, it might have to be replaced in 13 years. And that there are medical studies that say that there can be health issues with materials, and there are medical studies that say not necessarily. And we don't really know what the cost are. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered still. And I'm not assuming that because this is the proposal that the administrators came up with, that that's the best way to solve the problem, or even that it's a way that the community would support. So what I want to do is get other options to deal with the question that they raised. And, you know, that's pretty much the whole purpose.
I have a friendly amendment that the board researches so that it is not on the administration, that the board reaches out to Famulari to see if there is any interest. So it comes off as
I'd like to amend my motion to say that the board will do the research for Famulari Field.
Are you in agreement with that amendment? Second. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, the woman next to you has not had a chance to speak at all.
Marilyn Chiarella, Brattleboro. Just a point of clarification, because I'm hearing the term turf being used frequently, and there are two types of turf. There's synthetic artificial turf, and there's natural turf. So I would hope that people would clarify going forward which we're talking about.
Oh, there's so many, there's hybrid turf, I have read so much about turf, there are.
All right, living grass
Yeah,
turf.
so we should say
living
natural
turf.
grass, so the RFP now contains natural grass as well as synthetic from rubber, and then alternatives as we have spoken to before, and the main motion that I'm waiting to get back up to.
No, I
includes
just
those
wanted
three
that
options,
clarification,
yeah.
because I'm hearing it banding around. I know it's not on the Famulari piece.
Yeah, just one more thing too. The other thing is, when I'm not here, well, on Tuesday nights before I come here, I'm at the school board. And I think you all remember, I know Jill does, the probably 18-year process of getting a skate park in place. And I don't know if you've been up in Memorial Park yet, but the skate park isn't there. And all of the estimates that they made and all the fundraising that they did and all the times that they thought they had it, they found out once they started getting the bids that they didn't have it. And so, well, I don't want that to happen again. I want to have a firm number that we know it's going to cost. I want real projections for the expectation of what it's going to cost and what it's going to be involved in taking it up and replacing it when it wears out. And is it 8 years or is it 13 years, or do some of them go longer? I've also, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that there are three other artificial turf fields in the state, and two of them were privately funded. So, I mean, I need to know more about this. It may have been a 10-year study, but I'm being asked to make this decision, and I'm not going to make it until I know. And it has to save money, and it has to not hurt the kids. And we have not had that information.
So still, we're talking about Famulari. Kim Price.
Can you please put a time limit on this, that we need to have this information by a certain date, because we can't spend another 10 years getting this information and getting another field.
I will put a call in as soon as the motion is approved, within 24 hours, if the board authorizes me to do that.
Well, we're still going to need hard estimates, hard bids for this project.
But it may be that it's not resolvable within 2 years with the family, but to check in with Hillary and Jared and see what they're thinking. Who knows?
Christine?
Yes.
So, but the thing is, it seems like, from my understanding, if the motion was to include Famulari Field, we would still be, let's say Famulari Field, we get certain information and it says, okay, we need to get some bids, we could still move forward with, let's say we decided that Prem Rubber was the way we're gonna go, or grass. We can still move forward with that part if we so choose. So it's not, I mean, it could act to hold up something if we all wanted it to, but it doesn't actually have to. they're kind of separate, is that correct?
I would say I would see it that way as well, because they're not making land, you know. Well, they are actually, volcanoes are making land all the time, but they're not making land contiguous to our campus. And so
Yeah.
if there's an opportunity, I think we should consider it as a board. And we're talking about the athletic fields, as if they keep adding sports, it's something to consider as a board while we're looking at this whole process. And that might affect our thinking about how much we're going to invest in one thing versus the other. So I don't see it as holding up. I wouldn't expect it to hold up. I will try and get a hold of the owners of the field, assuming this motion passes. Yes.
Another thought.
And you are?
I'm Jody Normando from Dummerston. Another thought is back behind the baseball field and that whole area where the recycling was and everything. Has anybody looked into the possibility of reconfiguring that whole area and maybe getting some more land in that area that would be on campus with the lights and everything else?
Yes.
You have?
We haven't, but the administration is. Do you want to talk about that again?
Well, we don't own that land, that's town land, and so we would have to buy that from the town of Brattleboro, and that space where the recycling is not nearly, that's not nearly enough space. I mean, we need space for a full-size soccer pitch.
So even if you're dealing with the town, and the schools go together hand in hand, and you reconfigured and changed the soccer field another direction and do all of that, there wouldn't be enough space there?
Well, so
I shouldn't
Yes,
talk
you
to
may.
you. I should talk to
may.
Christina.
A couple of things. First of all, as we speak, you know, we're putting a maintenance garage, which was approved 2 years ago, not by this board. We have a maintenance garage that's getting placed on that site. So that's going to be a big part of that footprint. That's been through the permitting process, they're Act 50. So that's going to take up some of what that space might be. So then we also looked at the possibility of, do we, and I don't want to get struck by lightning, you know, do we look at deconstructing the tennis field grandstand, and do we move that back? Do we resituate? Do we resite that? That way, would we have enough space to put in two complete-sized fields in the outfield? As we've looked at that, we've determined that there's not sufficient space in the outfield to do that. And also, a lot of concerned citizens have rallied, and they've asked us to not tear down the grandstands and to leave it as is. And they're actually doing a fundraiser right now to rejuvenate those, which is fine. But you know, that is one of the options that we looked at. Based on that, we knew we wanted to keep sports on campus. We knew we wanted to keep people close as we could. And so we looked at the idea that by completing, you know, what we think is the linchpin of that area, you know, we have the grandstands we put in 2011, press box in 2012, that by placing that synthetic surface there, what we would be doing is we'd be creating the centerpiece for boys sports, for girls sports. We could use it for soccer, field hockey, all of those sports, all fall long. Right now, it's used, how many home games do we have?
14 varsity.
So
far.
No, football.
Football?
Yeah.
With playoffs, about 6 or 7.
So we'd be going from 6 or 7 home games in the fall to in excess of, I would say, 50.
Okay, but back to the other field, the baseball field.
Right.
I mean, you've looked at it. Has it been do we have a survey on it so we actually know what's there?
We have looked at it. We've played with the diagrams where we've actually taken the size of a regulation soccer pitch and tried to fit them into the outfield. It doesn't fit. It's not big enough.
That answers my question,
Jody,
probably.
So this isn't actually Famulari, so.
No, we just threw another thing.
I know, well, you want to, yeah.
Rob Deshard, Brattleboro. I just want to comment on follow up with what Steve said. we're talking about sports and like sports teams and this and that. I teach phys ed at BAMS, and I'm kind of thinking about all the kids. And I just wrote some numbers down. You know, I've taught there for 9 years, and usually we can't get out for class until after April vacation. So that's a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time in the spring because of, you know, whether it's mud, snow not melting, you know, we can't get on the fields because the condition. And, you know, I see over 150 students a day, and I just think about like the student physical education hours per day would be like 150, right? I multiply that times, and I've done my own research. I've talked to, you know, regular fields versus turf fields, and it's known that you can get out up to 7 weeks outside before than what I do now. You know, so say 35 extra school days, I get to bring my kids outside, and that equals the 35 extra days times 150 students a day. That's 5,250 hours that those kids get to spend outside instead of being inside a gym. And you know, if you want to break that down even more, it's 218 extra days they get to be outside.
So I think you're on the motion that we're not talking about right now.
Right, I just wanted to make a point that, you know, I'm thinking about all the kids, not just the sports, and, you know, regular field versus, you know, artificial field. Our kids would have more time outside, which would ultimately...
Can we get this motion on or off the table about Pommelari Field and looking into it, and then go back up to that motion?
Got it in
Any other comment on Pommelari so we can get to the motion everybody is so desiring to talk about, so we can either put this on the table? Yes, Sean?
Well, I would just say, Sean Murphy, I would just say, being on the BUHS board for many years, the idea of Familari was like a balloon that would come in and then would go out of the room and it would come back in and it would go out. So it was like nobody could ever get their hands around it and say, yeah, this is going to work. And I think we're exactly the same place that we were probably 10 years ago thinking about Familari. It has definite drawbacks in terms of a playable field. When my son was at BUHS, they played varsity lacrosse. It was totally inadequate. There was no place for spectators. There were no bathrooms. There was no changing. There was no access. There was no parking. So all those things, that's a myriad of questionable use for a field on a campus. All those things were problematical then, and they're still problematic. So I would say it would be interesting to know from the Familaris, but they've already been negotiated with and asked about, and the realtors have been engaged for many, many years. So it's not a new deal.
Well, I can't tell if you're speaking for or against the motion because you don't mind if I call.
I do not mind if you call,
Okay.
but I
So
just
that's-
wanted to do that as a little prelude. You know, it's like the skateboard park. It's something that has never happened for reasons.
So I think, are we ready to vote on Pommelari? So I think the motion is to authorize the chair of the board to contact the Pommelari family to see if there is interest in some sort of long-term lease or purchase agreement for field space. Does that seem like the motion?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I'll be making a call tomorrow, Kim Trice. Back to the main motion, which might be confusing to people. The main motion on the table is that we request of the administration to obtain RFPs for a natural grass option for resurfacing the field, a traditional, I hate to say that, a typical crumb rubber infill surface, as well as alternatives to the crumb rubber, a synthetic surface, but alternatives to the crumb rubber, such as a coconut or a cork or a wood. I'm not for the walnut because that has allergies. So, but some other alternatives. So that is the motion on the table. We're obtaining information and estimates, or moving forward with the RFP, but I believe the administration might have some late-breaking estimate information to share with the board.
We do. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay, so
The direction that we thought we were given from the board was to go ahead and find RFPs and look at RFPs for those things. As we researched with Frank's help, we realized that we really could not do an RFP because we're not at that stage yet. Because, for a lot of reasons, but mostly legally because of the bid process, that we really can't bring an RFP before this board until we are ready to move forward in that direction. So what Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Clark have done, and they spent a ton of time, is they've done a lot of research and they've looked at various options, and I'm going to ask them to share those options with you. One of the other things that's limited us is that to do this well as part of the RFP process is we have to go to an engineering study. And we have old engineering studies, but a new engineering study was going to cost us about $70,000. We were not ready to do that now. I mean, when we move forward, that'll be part of the project, but we weren't ready to say we're going to spend $70,000 for estimates. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we chose to do it this way. So, you know, as Chris and Robert have researched it, they've also done a lot of research on the health risks. They, you know, for every person that tells me, you know, there's an article in the Berkshire Eagle that somebody quoted about a doctor saying that knee injuries increase as much as 300% on artificial turf. What was neglected to say is in the next paragraph, another physician and resident said that had studies that said there are no more frequent or severe injuries. So, you know, in one regard, you know, we've been looking at data that people have chosen to present. And so Chris is going to kind of talk a little bit about that as well. He does have, you know, we do have a crumb rubber. We have a base price to share with you. And then on top of that, we also have prices for, and Chris will talk more about it, encapsulated crumb rubber, as well as 2 options for organic surfaces. And then finally, a cost for a natural grass replacement, with the caveat that that natural grass replacement has serious concerns if it's going to be used every year the way we want to use Natowich Field now. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Robert. I will pass this out to the board, yes.
And I think this is probably something that we're going to just take a general pass at tonight, because we have buildings and grounds as part of our finance committee. So I think that needs to be this needs to be on the buildings and grounds finance committee to do the deep dive on finances. But we're all excited to hear this late breaking flash.
So,
right, we're just saying estimates.
So we will go quick with some proposals and estimates that we have gotten. As Mr. Perrin alluded to, we really do need to have a specific RFP or engineering study, because there are a lot of options for synthetic fields out there. There are a lot of companies who make it. There's a lot of manufacturers who make the fields, in fields. So without specifically naming companies here tonight, we did the best we could to get ballpark figures that would pretty much satisfy every company that we could deal with. The first option that we pretty much vetted and did feasibility studies and have chosen the path of is a standard field of crumb rubber infill with a sand mixture with a monofilament fiber, and estimates would include all the stonework and the drainage that would go into building such a field. And the reason we chose that field is based on our geographic location and what we're trying to do on the field. Everybody's recommending crumb rubber is the best option to satisfy our needs. But a general price for a crumb rubber infield synthetic surface would be $10 a square foot all in. So our field is 93,400 square feet on Natowich, so a base price, we're looking at $934,000. So that would be a low-end estimate. There are options that we can put on turf fields. We want to put lines for every sport we could play on it: field hockey, soccer, lacrosse, football. Probably missing one, but I don't mean to. But that would raise the price. So I think the maximum price we'd be looking at would be $11 a square foot. So right around $1 million for a crumb rubber field. The benefits of crumb rubber are, and this can go either way, and we can talk about some of the health concerns later, but crumb rubber is the most vetted product out there. It's been used for a long time. It's been studied by some of the most, respected universities.
I think
Yes.
we're trying to just limit it to cost tonight and then.
Okay, I can do that.
And we could be here till 10 o'clock, so.
Well, I would like to address some of the health concerns later when this part is done. We did look at two other options for synthetic turf fields. One is not an organic option, but it is double coating a chrome rubber. Okay, so we take the chrome rubber and we double coat it with an acrylic product, and I guess you could say that stops the off-gassing and doesn't allow the chrome rubber to leach outside the paint. So that's the purpose of it. There's many different companies that make it. So to double coat chrome rubber, we would be looking at an additional cost of $1.50 a square foot, or another $140,000, upping the cost a little over $1 million. These kind of products are found in St. Michael's College, Dartmouth College, Burton Academy in Manchester, UNH, all have a double-coated chrome rubber field. A shock pad. So one option with a double-coated chrome rubber field would be the opportunity to put a shock pad in. So I've read in the newspaper, people have talked about concussions, some of the issues, and a shock pad does reduce concussions under a synthetic turf field. A shock pad probably costs $1 a square foot to put underneath a field. So to add a shock pad would be about, to this field, $93,400. However, when you combine the shock pad with double-coated chrome rubber, the price is the same because you have to use less infill. So when you use a shock pad, less infill is required. That would also be true of regular chrome rubber. So again, for a shock pad and double-coated chrome rubber, we're looking for an addition of $140,000, or a little over $1 million.
So can you not put a shock pad under the regular
You
chrome rubber?
do not need a shock pad for a regular chrome rubber or double-coated. It could be an option.
But you could put, because you just didn't have it listed here, but you could add that.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
The next option we looked at was an organic infill type product. There are several on the market. There are walnut, there are safe shell, there are pine. We chose to look at an organic infill product of 90% coconut husk and 10% cork, similar to what Landmark College uses. Using an organic product would require a shock pad, so it's not an option with organic products. And to do that, we'd be looking at, with the shock pad and the organic infill, an additional $170,000 to the base price of a chrome rubber field. So about $1.1 million for a field with an organic product. Finally, we did investigations on natural grass fields, and this was a little harder to get a specific estimate. With the synthetic estimates, you know, it's pretty standard, but with grass fields, there are not a lot necessarily being built. So we called companies that recently installed grass fields to just get their estimate. We kind of figured out that $400,000 to $550,000 was an estimated range based on the research that we did. One engineering firm in Massachusetts that we spoke to said we could expect to pay $500,000 for an entry field and up to $750,000 for a high entry field. Again, with natural grass, there would be more maintenance costs, and right now, we really don't spend a lot of money on maintenance. But with a high-end natural grass field, if we want to do what we want to do, we really have to up that in terms of maybe $50,000 a year. And there'd be other issues as well.
So that last sentence, you're saying that there could be more time, more play time on a natural grass field with more maintenance.
Well, to do everything that we want to do, and I could just take a moment, I kind of follow some things in the newspaper, and I think there was an article written about a specialized sports turf manager, and Robert and I actually made phone calls this week to talk to some of these people. I'll have to find his name here, but
John Lee Keller?
we spoke to Jared Minnick of the Natural Grass Advisory Group out of Baltimore, and so he's familiar with some things. And he did state that while he's a natural turf proponent, at some times synthetic turf is the only way to go. So for everything we want to do, he said there were options that we could try, including putting the hybrid turf between our hash marks and playing around with things, but he talked about lighting. but we just know that the maintenance to continually use the field the way we want to use it would be at least 50,000, if not more, and may result in needing to resod the field every year. So that's some of the things we talked about with him.
How much does it cost to resod the field?
Excuse me, could you just, if you want to speak, could you just raise your hand and I'll call on you, you can address it to me, and I'll phone a friend. Sorry.
Well, given the scope of the resod, because we don't always have to resod the entire field, but up to 50,000, I think, maybe per year.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. We did research the blended turf, which was a little strange.
Barcelona plays on it.
Yeah, you know what though? That's like, you know, like colleges try that first. I don't know, it's not proven.
But there are places that are,
Yeah, I know, but
it's been around for 6 years.
But it hasn't really been around that long. It's really a new thing.
Yeah, well, it's been in Europe for a really long time.
Yeah, I heard about the Europe.
Right, so that was his point. It is a scary thought, though, in the United States. It has been in Europe a lot, but as we see new fields being put in, you know, we go back to Rutland High School, put in a brand new natural grass field about 2 years before they had to undo the field because it wasn't draining properly and put in a synthetic field. So while it's been in Europe, it's still new technologies, and we're a high school. Our groundskeepers went to Middlebury College a few years back, and Middlebury College has a dedicated groundskeeper for each specific field that they use for each specific sport. And we're a high school, and our groundskeepers are in charge of a lot of things. So to think we're going to manage a program such as this is just a lot to put on them.
And here's the other thing. The other thing that is not being considered is the amount of herbicides and pesticides that we are going to be applying that we do not apply now. And there's going to be a lot of that. So it's not really environmentally, socially conscious to use all those chemicals, and we try to stay away from it as much as possible.
I believe there's antibiotics you have to put on, they recommend antibiotics being put on the synthetic fields, from what I understand, because of MRSA concerns,
Yeah,
a lot of
so
them.
actually I can speak to MRSA, but
But one of the things they recommend is antibiotics.
actually they don't anymore.
They don't anymore?
No, they just don't find it necessary because of the new infill systems. It's not a hospitable environment for MRSA or staff, and with the temperatures and the UV light, it doesn't survive very long. So.
So before I go to the citizens that have assembled, I just want to make sure the board has heard everything from the administration, if they have any clarifying questions, or?
I think I actually have 2 questions.
Yes.
When was the current Natowich field last resurfaced? And if you're not currently using, I'm pointing on the term, but chemical sprays, why would you need to in the future?
We do it on a very limited basis right now. But to maintain a field, once you build a $550,000 field for $750,000, I don't think people would like it if we just let it go and the next thing it was drowned the next time you showed up at a game. So to maintain something like that, it is a lot of work, and you have to put those things down, or you get infiltration of crabgrass and all kinds of other things, pests. They eat the roots of the grass, and then it all turns brown.
Do you know when it was last resurfaced?
1965.
Okay.
In Natowich, 1965.
That's a long time ago.
So we have excellent keepers who have done a great job maintaining our fields. But it's not about the safety of our fields. We're adding more use to it, and we can't keep up with that use. So that field hasn't been done since 1965, and we're milking it, and we do a lot of management and scheduling around our field situation, but we're running out of that opportunity. And furthermore, we just want all of our students to have access to a first-rate facility that some of our teams enjoy, but not everybody.
I just have a question about process. So where in the process are we? Meaning we're not voting tonight to say we're going to do natural grass, but it seems like we have some estimates, but you had said that there needed to be a $70,000 engineering thing that goes on, and then we could put together the RFPs. So right now the motion on the table is just to consider this. That would still not change, I think, if we vote.
Right, and so if we decide to move forward with one of the other options, then with Frank's guidance, we'll prepare the RFPs, we'll probably do the engineering study then, because that engineering study will have to be done no matter what we do in the future. So we would probably do that step next, with the board's permission. And then from there, I guess what we're looking for the board to do is to kind of give us some guidance about, which of these options do we look at? Because we don't want to bring RFPs for all 4 of these options. That doesn't make sense. We're not going to get vendors. So what we really need to do is really need to get, some options that you want us to pursue. From there, we would bring in the vendors, we would move the process along. I mean, our hope originally was to have this ready, in June. Our hope was to have the field installed right after football season. Now, our hope is to hopefully get it installed for spring. If that doesn't happen, we're going to look at getting it done right after graduation this year, 2020. We'd like it ready to be used for the fall, to 2020 at the very least. Another thing that Chris didn't mention that, were we to go with a pure natural field, we would probably not have home games for 1 or 2 years. Because that field needs a year or 2 years, I'm not sure which it is, to actually get ready to go. So that would be another piece.
So we would lose the field for up to 1 year, and again, there's no guarantee that we'd be able to do everything that we need to do on a natural grass field and have it stand up and be sustainable.
So could I speak to the framework again, also address that question? So thank you, Steve, that was good. We need to obviously follow the state law, the state bid law. We haven't talked about that because typically a board would authorize a project that a feasibility study would have shown its value and the ability to complete the project and achieve your solution. So really that's what we're looking for tonight. The state law is pretty straightforward. And we don't do more than $500,000 projects that often. We do them. I've managed many of them, but we're using language that doesn't go with the state bid law. So let me just map that out. It's pretty simple. Projects over $500,000 require a board to pre-qualify the vendors. The pre-qualification process says that there will be a criteria published, advertised meeting, by the board that establishes the criteria for which you will select at least 3 qualified contractors. So that criteria typically is, can they do the work you want them to do? So of course that is what Robert and Chris and Steve have been working, defining the work. That's the specification. That's what we refer to as what's in an RFP, a request for proposal. You're not asking for requests for proposals, and they're not giving them to you. They're giving you budgetary estimates. But the board hasn't given the administration a clear sense of what is the scope of the work. That's what we hope to accomplish tonight. So, but once we get there, it's board conducts establish a criteria to pre-qualify at least 3 vendors that can meet the board specification. So, second, within 30 days, you will have a board meeting to select those vendors. So the RFQ, request for qualification, is the first step. Vendors respond. The administration has done a great job sort of alerting the industry that we're interested. So we think that you'd get a very good response. You have a public meeting and listen to their presentations. So the vendors come, they present to you why they think they're the best firm. You select out of the pool, hopefully we get 6, you select at least 3. You might select all of them. And then no later than, or maybe I think it's no earlier than 30 days after that, you have a public bid. You have a sealed bid process, and you either award the bid at that time, or if you need to sort through the proposals, you have time to do that. So it's at a minimum a 60-day process. It's pre-qualifying the vendors first, having them come to your meeting and you select them. Then they get the actual bid RFP that has the scope of the work, and it's going to either say, give me a turf field with alternates A, B, and C, or it's going to say something that we haven't contemplated yet. And then David, I think that's where you get all of the professional sort of insight. This is the best the industry can do. You get to ask your questions around, anything related to the, to the scope of the work. And then, so you have these decision points at least twice, generally 3 times. The first one is select contractor. The second one is to approve the RFP, the scope of the work. And the third is to say, yes, we can afford the bids that have come back to us based on our request. So it's generally in the school district's best interest to be very clear about the specification. If we ask for a very broad spec, we're going to get a really broad spectrum of quotes, and oftentimes it will increase the cost a lot up to the project if we haven't been definitive about here's the problem that we want solved and here's the scope of the solution that we want considered. So it's in our best interest to engage Chris, Steve, the prior board, Sean's work on the Brattleboro Union Finance Committee, all of that question and answer and analysis, so we have as narrow a scope as we can that's, responds to your questions and obviously the student need.
So are you asking the board to decide tonight what direction we go based on this without having any time to consider it? Is that what?
No, what would really be useful is to answer the kind of the key question that I think a lot of the folks in the public have raised, which is, are we moving forward with the June 12th vote, and what is the scope of the project? You really need to define the scope of the project in order to move forward.
What can you define for me? Can you clarify for me the scope of the project?
The scope of the project, on the understanding of all the work that the VSBA Finance Committee did and then the full board, was that it was going to be a turf field improvement. So if the administration is ready to move forward with developing a request for qualification that would get at least 3 firms in front of you for you to interview for a synthetic turf field. That was the argument that was made for the June 12th board meeting. The vote was favorable by the electorate. We're ready to move forward based on what you just heard tonight with that. So if you're comfortable saying yes, go ahead, you can have all of those answers for you over the course of those 3 events that we just talked about. But if you want to expand that, meaning adding grass turf, that's where we don't have a professional engineering study. That's where the district, the Wyndham SD district will have to incur additional costs.
We have to have an engineering study no matter what path we go, right? We're not off that $70,000 we're spending no matter what. Because the turf field is it's sort of a modular product that is it's not like that it's a custom build for every time they go. It's a manufactured product. We don't have to spend $70,000 for a design plan like we would normally do when you build an addition, right? We've got the substantial, understanding of how that field was built, and Robert Clark has represented all of the anticipation of drainage and so on that has already been put under the field.
And we would require the manufacturer and the installer to do that analysis and that work as part of the bid process. But we can't do that with a grass field, and it would not, my understanding, it would not be typical that the synthetic turf field bidder would also be in the same industry as putting a grass field in. Am I right about that, or is that?
With limited choices.
The field manufacturer, you're correct, engineers find both, but
Yeah.
a field builder would not.
The installer is not going to have that expertise. I've had a brief conversation with folks that do consult on installing a turf field, with the best hybrid grass available that's the most durable and so on. And they're saying that the geology that Steve mentioned it's a very significant thing. You have to understand the existing conditions on your site, and as it relates to drainage, because these kinds of fields require so much irrigation and maintenance. That's where you've got to spend a fair amount of engineering. That's very different than you would if you're putting in synthetic turf.
Which Sean was waiting for.
Yeah, I would just like to say that in a high school, there's so many different venues for expression. Art, music, sports, all these different things. So what happened at VUHS was that we had limited things that we could do in terms of sports. We couldn't have playoff soccer games because of the infield actually impinging on the pitch. And the Natowich field now, which is a sod field, can only have very limited use. I would reiterate, my son was a lacrosse player, so he was able to play on that field just in the spring. Otherwise, it was, you couldn't go there. So it was football and lacrosse. So with a sod field, since there are so many athletes and student athletes at BUHS, a field that is lined for multiple events, that is extremely durable, that's actually a heck of a lot of fun to play on because it is perfect. You can see all the lines. It's a huge thing for people and also students. It's a huge thing for any kids that are interested in athletic endeavors. So, is it ideal? Probably not. Are there reservations? Probably are. But in terms of what it will actually give the students for enjoyment in the high school and the middle school and the career center, it would be a tremendous advantage to Brattleboro Union High School and all 5 towns, because the Vernon students would be playing on that field also. So, there are a lot of advantages to it, and it would mean a lot of playtime and a lot of enjoyment and a lot of good feeling. I'm off the field.
Melanie, did you want to?
I don't know what to say. I'm a little surprised that we have these, I guess. From conversations that I heard, it seemed like we were just going to be talking about tonight if we want to add this option, because we had tabled it. I'm glad that we have actually all these numbers, and thank you, and for explaining the process. As far as narrowing down the process, we had talked at the last board meeting of operating a little differently and having a press release so that more, it seems like everybody here found out about the meeting, so I'm glad you guys did. But we had talked about having a press release so that anybody who thought this issue might be coming up and we might be making some critical decisions, that narrowing the scope could be there. So we had made that public knowledge we would do that, which we did draft the press release, but then I don't feel like there was a clear understanding that you guys would be expecting us to narrow it already. I like to know these timelines. That was helpful because, if we're, we need to make some decisions eventually. We can't just keep putting off things forever. And I don't know, I'm kind of combining a lot of different thoughts here. That's surprising, that's my one thought. I don't know if we're ready to narrow it. I'm not sure how everybody else feels. I'm hesitant to spend $70,000 on an engineering study, but I'm also hesitant to take that off the table because I don't know that we've heard all the opinions. But I did have a question though. My question was, we had this idea that it would go in November, and then it was, you said the spring, and now it's maybe fall 2020 might be reasonable. We want to resurface the field because there's challenges with it. If there's big challenges with it, it would suggest that, can it last till fall 2020? I guess I'm just confused at how can we push it back if there's challenges?
Sure, so the biggest challenge is access. And the idea that we can't use the field, therefore we can't have our teams practice as often as they want. Chris and I actually fielded a phone call from a parent a couple of weeks ago who's very upset that their JV player didn't have practice until 5:30. And what are they going to do from 3:30 to 5:30? Well, the reason they don't is because we don't have a field for them until 5:30. So those are the issues. Can we limp along the way we have? Yes. Will we have to rethink adding middle school lacrosse? Probably. Will we have to look at sports that people want us to add or maintain? We won't be able to keep doing it. So the reason there's the pressure is that we want to make sure that we can get boys and girls on that field using it all the time. We want to make sure that all of our sports can play in the centerpiece field that we have on campus. We want to make sure that we can have soccer games, field hockey games. We have an incredibly competitive soccer team this year. They are going to go deep into the playoffs. These guys work really hard. And we're putting them on the smallest field in the state. And we're putting them on a field that is substandard. So we want to rectify that. That's, for me, that's the pressure, is that I'm looking and I'm seeing a waste of space. I'm seeing an incredible waste of resource, especially in the fall. And so what I'd really like to see us do is I'd really like to see us, and that's why we're recommending a turf surface, a synthetic surface, because it will let us use it earlier in the spring. It will let us practice, it'll drain faster. We won't have to cancel practice and then say, well, it's not raining anymore, but we have to wait a day for the field to drain. It'll drain. We can use it. So I guess, and I don't know.
So I'm going to just...
I would just speak to the timeline real quick, just because...
Well, then everybody's going to want equal time, and you guys will have a long platform.
The timeline is specific for a reason, because there's only certain times these fields can be installed. We can't install it during a fall or spring season, so we need to contract out ahead of time. So the day after graduation, doing this in the summer would be ideal, but that's kind of why the timeline is created the way it is, so we can schedule those types of things.
Thank you. So I would like to clarify for Emily that the last conversation I had with Steve was he was not going to have anything for this meeting. And so I had not known that you were going to bring estimates to the meeting. That was not communicated to me. So the communications committee asked if they should send out a press release so that all interested citizens could attend. And so that I said, no, don't send out that press release because we are not at the stage where we're considering what we're going to go with. So I'm now in a very difficult position. I do not like surprises sitting up here. That's when you find that I'm not so nice. But I feel we have told people in the community that we're interested pro and con that we were not discussing this tonight. And that was the top priority of our communications committee, and I had no knowledge. So I feel like it would be really irresponsible of our board to take action when we have told members of the community that no action would be taken because I was not informed that there was any estimates coming up.
I think we should, we're not going to act tonight. And I think given we're responsible for all of these schools now, not just high school, we need to put this into the mix and consider all of that. I also think that we did make a commitment to engage the public in this process, and we're going to do that. I suggest that we either add to next agenda or an upcoming agenda the public conversation and maybe even a decision about whether to go forward with the steps that Frank laid out or not. And I should write this down, because the other thing is that we should write down questions that we have, that we need answered for ourselves, never mind the things that the public's going to suggest, and that we put that on an agenda for either the next meeting or the meeting after that, where there's not as much business, or have an additional Wednesday meeting on the 2nd or 4th, have an additional meeting basically in a public meeting about this particular issue. And get as much information as we can to answer some of the questions. Some of them we're never going to get answered, but questions about what are the replacement costs and things like that, we certainly can get answered. And there are all kinds of, like, looking around, I know I see lots of people that have questions about the health issues as well, and they're respecting the agenda, and and haven't tried to talk about their side of it. Unless we're going to do that now and stay.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to do that once the board has
Okay. Well, I would
gotten
suggest
their
that we not,
questions out of the way.
that we have a separate meeting and do this properly instead of trying to do it now. Nobody was expecting this, and nobody was anticipating making decisions tonight.
No, I'd echo what David said. I think it'd be nice to have more time to focus specifically on this one issue, because we have had a lot of stuff to deal with, and this is just, it's a lot coming at us.
Yeah. Anybody else on the board have a comment before I throw it out to the rest of the audience?
I do actually want to.
Yes.
So maybe at the next, just to throw it out there, is if we were going to do this next meeting, I like the idea of having an additional meeting, maybe just for this, but it would be good to consider authorizing spending for this. If we decide that one of these options needs extra spending, we should expect to be doing something at this next meeting, meaning the board will be making a decision, and that decision may involve money.
And it would be warned appropriately.
Yeah, because I think that we can't just delay forever, right? So people can't keep coming every time. I'm sure they're busy.
So, seeing no other concerns from the board, if anybody wants to speak to the turf fields, this is the moment you've been waiting for. I'm not talking about Pomolari anymore. Raise your hand so I can get a count, so in case. So I should get 9 people, so if you could provide us to our usual 2 minutes. Sean is my timekeeper.
Christina, can I point something out? You have a colleague who would like to speak prior. I don't think you saw.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ann?
Oh, for 20 minutes was it?
Oh, I looked around and you were out of the room, sorry.
Sorry. Will a natural grass field allow enough playing hours to bring us into Title IX compliance, which I am sure we are not at this point?
My knowledge, we are in Title IX.
Probably not. Most schools in the country are not just here.
I believe we are, and this field would expand use for all of our students. So I think the short answer is, right now in the fall, the field is exclusively used for one program, and that's football, which doesn't have any female participants. In the spring, it is even, because it is used by boys and girls lacrosse. But it would certainly improve access and equity, because you would see field hockey, you'd see girls soccer in addition to boys soccer and football on that field. So it would be a step for equity, yes.
So I had 8 people that wanted to speak, so we're doing a 2 minute to 3 minutes, and I'm going to go around where I am.
No, that's fine.
So just that, first.
It's Brian Tyler from Brattleboro. I think what the administration is looking for from you tonight is action for the RFQ, not the RFP. So there's no cost implications, there's no discussions of whether it's good or bad, you're just putting together the RFQ. So there's no damage in doing anything with the RFQ tonight, other than moving it forward for the administration so they can be working on it. You still have plenty of time to do all the discussions with other people in the public, but if you put the RFQ together, the process can continue. And it's not going to cost any money. All you're doing is looking for contractors to do the work. RFQ, RFP, totally different things.
talked to the board, we did not warn anything about an RFQ tonight, so if we would be taking action that was not warned, I have a concern about that. Jamie.
Jamie Comtois, Putney, Vermont. I am so excited that we're going to resurface a field that hasn't been resurfaced since 1965. My kindergartner is playing soccer right now, and it's really nice to have a big field, so I want to honor that. I also want to say that I'm volunteering on the communications committee, and it was really critical to us and in the work that I've done around projects like this in the past to have a really explicit timeline and a process so people can see where the decision-making points are. And I documented what looked like 7 process decision points tonight that we could communicate to the public. The state bid law, you said, required a feasibility study, pre-qualification criteria, choose 3 qualified contractors. Within 30 days, you select those vendors. Then there's an RFQ, then public meeting, you select at least 3. So if I understood, RFQ would bring us to a couple steps in. And I thought at the early August meeting, we'd already talked about RFPs had been prepared and put out. So I'm a little confused because I hear, okay, so no RFPs ever were prepared. Okay, good. Because that was unclear at the August meeting. So the question. Okay.
Budgetary estimates.
Okay. So I think the other thing that gets locked in, as far as I heard, is that turf, it doesn't matter what surface you're dealing with, if you're doing a crumb rubber or something like that. But a feasibility study is required for a natural surface. So if we jump ahead on those, in that process, you don't get to incorporate a natural grass feasibility study into the process, it sounds like. So it's kind of bypasses a couple of steps. So I just wanted to name that's really critical, both for the learning process of our new merged board and also for the public who wants to participate in the process, to have an explicit process documented so we understand where our decision-making points are and a timeline for where we can participate in the process. And there are a lot of us who are really supportive of the field getting resurfaced, including myself. But that one of the things that gets contentious is where you feel like, hey, I'm ready to participate in a process and it just flew by me. And so I'm just trying to figure that piece out. The thing I didn't hear tonight was the years to replace. I think we need a cost, we need a use, and we need a years to replace. And so I would love an Excel document that gave me that data right in front of my face, because I heard $50,000 for maintenance, and I heard $50,000, I didn't know what a resodding was gonna cost every year. So it seems like having that analysis, boom, 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 side by side, would be so clean. $3, $30,000?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Oh. So that, I had just 2 more things I'll say, and that is, I do think that really needs to be documented so that there can be a really clear analysis by this body. And you can actually do that fairly quickly. Sounds like we're almost ready to be ready for that. So the other thing I wanted to say is I used to do research on turf maintenance and looking at alternatives to pesticides. And so I did that research in 1999 when I did a lot of work with a municipality that was trying to reduce pesticide use. And there's so many techniques available to us. So anyways, thank you.
Just a quick point of order. If we're having 2 minutes, we need to stick to the 2 minutes.
Well, 2 minutes and then go to 3 minutes and then we'll all move along. So try to do it in 2 minutes. When I said it 3 minutes, we'll get the, you know. Sorry.
Hi, Ellen Strong Putney. I know there's many factors you're considering, and I hear primarily environmental and health factors and cost factors, but I'd like to just follow on to Jamie's comment. As everybody's talking, I feel like some of the additional playing hours and equity is getting lost when talking about the assumed health benefits of a natural turf. So I was wondering if, talking about your spreadsheet, and if there would be a way to kind of project cost of each surface per playing hour or something like that, just because there'll be more people who can use an artificial turf surface for longer in the year. So I just think that a metric like that could be useful when you're looking at the financial piece. I know it's not going to address the environmental. Thank you.
Yes, there are a few things that came up in the presentations tonight. The use of pesticides does not necessarily mean it has to be used on natural grass. You can have an organically managed field. So that should not be even a question. And a properly installed organically managed grass field with deep roots will not have those drainage issues because the soil will become more like a sponge. And so that's a real important piece. And I had given out at the last meeting several booklets, and two of them were case studies from Marblehead and Springfield. And I'm just curious. There were some charts in there about the amount of hours that the fields are being used. And these are organically managed grass fields. And it just seemed to be comparable to what the artificial turf was using. And I might be misinterpreting what I read, but I would like to hear from other districts or schools that are using natural turf compared to the use in the synthetic field to see if they can really get multiple use during a season. Marblehead and Springfield are the two districts that were cited in the studies that I provided before. The replacement timeline, I think the companies are going to tell you one thing, but I think in reality we really should find that information out from people that have, or from districts that have artificial turf, if that's the way you're going to proceed, and see about organically managed, well-managed, good soil. The environmental issue you cannot overlook. We're about to possibly, declare a climate crisis, and to put down a plastic rug covering up living natural grass and soil is creating a disaster. It is a heat, it's going to be like a heat island in the middle of the field. It's killing off all the microbes underneath, and the soil is the biggest carbon sink we have, a terrestrial carbon sink. So to take that away, for just, even if it's just that one, however many square feet, 934 square feet, is that what, no, it was more than 934,000 square feet, I guess it was. Anyway, to take it away from that, when we're talking about climate change and we have a sustainability committee, it just doesn't seem to compute to me. So we really have to take the environmental costs into play. Thank you.
You've had a lot of more time. I'm just going to open it to the public, and then I'll...
I can answer some questions though as we go, if we'd like to clear up some issues, but I will just write them down.
I want to make sure we get to the people that raise their hand that I promised to speak. Yes.
I've been Chadwick Brattleboro again. In reading the June 12th minutes, it seems like there was an approval of a certain amount of funds already that were earmarked for this exact purpose. And we already had this discussion in June. There was an approval, there was a vote, there was a discussion about the different alternatives, what was available, and it was approved at $750,000, although maybe short of what Chris Sawyer has presented tonight, that money has already been earmarked for this project. So the question I really have is, why are we rehashing the wheel here, at least with regards to that $750,000 now? Ricky Davidson, he made the motion. It was for the purpose, specifically for necessary capital improvements to the recreational field. That's pretty specific. We know what the recreational field is. It's Natowich Field. That's the one that needs to work. And there's $750,000 somewhere that has been approved to get this going. $750,000 is $200,000 short of what we need to get this project completed. So I don't understand why we're taking 4 steps back and now going over again whether, exactly what we're going to do here when that discussion has already been had and the vote had already been had and the public had already been noticed about that. So are we essentially asking for us to go back and re-decide what has already been decided in front of the public and what the public already approved?
Yeah.
It's illegal. I believe also that it was a request for a bond, a loan.
Yeah, it was to borrow the money.
To borrow the money for $750,000, I believe. Is that correct, Frank?
It allowed for financing the project, but the article is designed to give the district authorization to move forward with the project. And then the financing was provided in the event it was needed. The capital fund does show that it has 1.4 million in cash, and the expectation was as long as other projects didn't become a higher priority, we wouldn't even need to borrow the money, but the money was available if it was needed.
So it was a request to borrow the money?
Up to,
Yeah,
yeah.
up to
Up to, yeah.
So it's a little, just a point of clarification, I think is a little bit different.
But the budgetary estimates had been provided at the time, and the expectation was that the project would be a million or 1.2 million was the range. I don't know if the minutes reflected that, but those were the discussions at the VHS meeting.
But just to be clear, if I can just follow up and use the rest of my 2 minutes, not a dime of that money has been actually spent towards going forward with this project at this point, despite previous approval in June.
Actually, I just had a question. This was not my time to speak, but David blatantly said yes. So is the reason you're now debating it, you didn't like the vote and didn't agree with how that was voted on by the public at the June meeting? Now we're rehashing it. I'd like to know that.
No, the reality is that the board that made that decision didn't have to come up with the money to spend it. That board is gone. The decision was to borrow money, and now we have to consider that board's total outlook was the high school facility. Now ours is everything, and we're the ones that are going to have to raise the funds to pay for that, and it will wind up competing with the development, with the improvements here. It's going to compete with paying for this extra special ed support that we're going to need. It's going to compete with paying for pre-K, and we're not sure that it's the right way to go in terms of health issues, and we're not sure that it's an efficient process. So because it was approved and money was set aside, doesn't mean that we have to do that. If the law said we had to do that, then we would have to do it.
So,
The law said you have to do that.
Excuse me.
The law said you have to do
Now
it.
hire a lawyer, get an opinion, bring a legal opinion saying that, and
Please
we'll consider that.
please address the
No more.
chair. Please address the chair. Kate O'Connor.
Thank you. My name is Kate O'Connor, and I'm from Brattleboro, and I just want to clarify one thing. I was at that meeting in June. It's the BUHS number 6 meeting. There were, 5 towns represented in that district. The administration can tell you how many people. There are thousands of voters in the BUHS number 6. There were 67 people that voted on that amendment or that motion that day, which is basically the number of people in this room. So I think it gets over-exaggerated, saying the voters voted for this. And second of all, what we voted on was authorizing the BUHS number 6 board to take out a $750,000 loan for resurfacing of Nanowich Field. There was never talk, there was nothing in the motion that talked about synthetic chrome rubber or whatever. So I just want to put that in perspective. And I'll admit, there were 2 of us that voted no. I was one of them, so I was outvoted 65-2. But there were thousands of people that could have been in that room that night, and they weren't. Thank you.
I'm Jeff Sten again. I was actually at that meeting too, and in the previous meetings when the discussions went on about the synthetic versus the natural turf, and I do remember that money was allocated and money was approved for this project. And so when I started hearing, I heard this was going to be rehashed, you just look at the law, and you don't have the authority to do this. You legally don't have the authority to do this. You can't amend that distribution of funds by Article 5 and Article 14, whatever. So I don't even understand. I mean, it was approved. The artificial turf was approved. The money was approved. The previous board says right here, the new board can't change that.
Yeah, so I was under the impression that we approved resurfacing, which we're still actually discussing, resurfacing.
They talked about synthetic, they did all the numbers.
But is it in the actual, is it in the actual language of what the motion was? Because if not, I think Keith just read it too, no?
The motion right here, it says, Ricky Davidson moved. I move that the voters of the school district authorize the school board to borrow up to $750,000 not to exceed 5 years for the purpose of necessary capital improvements to the recreation field. The motion is second. Ricky Davidson spoke to the motion, indicating that research on synthetic versus natural turf field improvements has been ongoing since 2002. The need for field space continues to increase. At this point, the district needs to put significant funding towards field improvements to get what is needed for our program. And then it goes on and talks about all of the things that regarding toxicity and natural and turf, and mentions all of that. So it's not specifically in the motion, but it was specifically stated right after it when the person spoke to the motion.
So I guess in terms of the point of clarification, we have clarification. It was not in the motion. Synthetic was not in the motion. I think, Frank, you addressed beforehand the legality and the restricted funds, and what was your?
Yeah, the point is that the Brattleboro Union High School Board approved a capital plan. They published the capital plan in the annual report, and the capital plan did specifically identify the project. And so in this case, this is a situation where the project was approved and there was sufficient funding available to proceed with the project. So we clarified the difference, with like the academy addition, different scenario. But in this case, there was funding available and it was a published approved plan.
And so does that fall under restricted funds in terms of the Articles of Agreement?
It follows under reserve funds. The article speaks to reserve funds. It doesn't say endowment reserve funds or special revenue. It just says reserve funds, and actually that was added by the State Board of Ed because Article 5 is basically 1970 law when all of the union schools were being formed. And the State Board of Ed added reserve to that. And without that, this wouldn't be an issue. But they specifically added that the new board will, it says shall, it doesn't say may, it says shall implement the restricted purposes of those reserve funds.
You good, Emily? Okay. So, other, Kim. Oh, shoot. Kim, I let you ask that question before. Do you mind if I ask something else? Because this is technically a second go round.
Yeah, Sarah Gagnon, Brattleboro. So I was at the June meeting and I voted yes for the reserve funds. So I came tonight because I was confused because we're rehashing this. It seems to me like it was already decided. But I don't really think I want to talk about that because everyone's talking about that. I really like what Sean Murphy said, what you said earlier. And, I had a son that was here in middle school and in high school and he played football and he played lacrosse. And I watched how sad he was when he couldn't get on the field in the spring because it was wet, it had snowed, they couldn't scrimmage. They couldn't be as prepared as so many of the other schools around the state because they had turf fields and they could plow them and their kids could get on them. And I just think that I know there's so many issues to think about. There's health concerns and there's economic reasons. But then there's the student athletes. And I wonder if you guys have met any of them and whether you've gone to any of their games. Do you go to a Friday night football game? Have you seen the school spirit? It's amazing. And it's a really, really important thing for our kids. And, I think that this has gotten really contentious and I think it's too bad. I just mean, just give them a turf field. Would you please just give them a turf field? They need it. They just need it. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah.
Kim Price from Brattleboro. I grew up in Brattleboro. I didn't play soccer because I was in the band, so I marched on the football field at halftime and did performances, and so I was able to get on that. But the soccer teams played in the exact same location where they play now. They played on the baseball fields. It is just as dangerous now as it was then. playing on fields where you go from grass to dirt, back to grass, is dangerous to begin with. But then when you get, it's a wet surface, I've seen kids out there where they've blown ACLs on that field. So to say that the turf is not safe, obviously anything is not safe when you play a sport, but going back and forth on that field is extremely dangerous for those athletes. We moved back here and I knew what my kids were going, the community that they were coming to and the school that they were going to be going to. So that's why I said we're going back there, because I knew what it was going to be like. However, if I was coming from Connecticut and moving up here without knowing this community and having grown up here, I would not have brought my kids here. I would have, because I would have researched, I would have looked at the high school, we would have come to visit. My kids play soccer, I would have seen that field and said, hell no, not in any way is my child playing on that field. It's unsafe. I would have been like, this is crazy. We've been playing on it, graduated in high school in '88. They've been playing on that field for decades, and it needs to change. If we always talk about we want to bring people into this town, we have to have the facilities and the fields to want families to bring their kids here. What we have now is not going to pass muster.
Thank you, Ken. I saw Tim first.
Yeah, two things.
Could you just state your name, sorry?
Tim Maciel, Brattleboro. I just don't understand why BUHS is so disadvantaged. My understanding is that there are 84 high schools, 28 union high schools in the state, and there are, 3 or 4 synthetic turfs. So why is BUHS so disadvantaged? Perhaps it's because it needs resurfacing. I think we all agree that it needs resurfacing. The question is natural turf or synthetic turf. The 90% of the high schools in this state get along fine with natural turf. So that's one thing. Side note, for any Fighting Irish fans, the University of Notre Dame tried synthetic turf for 4 years. This year they're going back to natural grass. They won 11 national championships with natural grass and none with synthetic turf. But we're not the University of Notre Dame, we're Brattleboro. And again, I just don't understand why we're so disadvantaged here. The second thing is, if anybody, I know David was at the select board meeting yesterday, there hasn't been that much mention about the environmental impact. Marilyn brought it up very eloquently. What are the environmental costs? David, you mentioned that you would consider 2 factors, the health and safety of the students, of course, and the financial cost. The third, I think, is big, and that's the environmental cost. Anybody who was at the select board last night knows that students were incredibly passionate about the climate emergency that we're facing. And what does this tell those students who are really worried sick about the environmental crisis if we put in a plastic rug and dispose of it 8 years later in landfill?
So Jill Stahl-Tyler, I restate what I heard here and from Jeff, I'm completely flummoxed as to how this can even be re-questioned legally. I don't understand that at all. I'm also concerned about some of the other articles when I review them today and whether all of that's being followed, and I think I'll follow up with that at some other time. I'd like to cede my time to Chris Sawyer so he can answer some of the questions that people are asking. So Chris, you get my time.
Sure, thanks. So one first question is exact dates when fields would be, when's the time up on a synthetic field? So we know warranty for synthetic fields are generally 8 to 10 years, depending on the type of field. A chrome rubber field is generally shown it will last at least 12 years, and some fields are getting up to 14 years. Dalton High School and Burlington High School fields were both installed in 2008. They're still both going. Actually, I think it was the Cherry studies that what it was done at UMass Lowell. That was one of the first fields ever put in, synthetic turf fields, and they're the ones who conducted the study. That was put in 2002, and that was just finally replaced this year. So we're seeing that we are getting 12 to 15 years out of the new generation of chrome rubber fields, but again, it's hard to say that because the warranty is 8 years. For organic fields, the time expectancy is 8 years. So in the last year of organic fields warranty, it is time to move on to a different field. Chrome rubber, you probably get safely, say 12 to 14 years. Brattleboro is not disadvantaged. We have a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great fields, but unlike other communities, we are landlocked in this town. Going back to the Route 30 field project, we know we have a field shortage in Brattleboro. There's not an opportunity for more fields. If you go to some other schools in the state, they have fields upon fields. They also have bigger gymnasiums, so when we talk about Brattleboro teams practicing in a gym, it's not like, I'm not going to name another school, but other schools have much bigger gyms. So we unfortunately don't have a lot of land. I think we can all agree, I would agree, I'd rather play on a natural grass field. A lot of people would. It's just not something that's possible. Now that I know your name, I appreciate the articles you wrote to the forum because I did contact some of those people. And they both agreed, and I think there was a booklet made for a school board that talked about sometimes there just needs to be a synthetic field. So that would be just, we're just landlocked. We just don't have the field space other schools have.
Is there anybody else that wanted to speak to this that asked to speak?
I didn't before, but I was gonna,
Okay, we have a full agenda, so if you could really keep under that 2 minutes because I divided up the time.
I have like 3 sentences. Jackie, I'm from Brattleboro. I just wanted to point out that if we're talking about a chrome rubber artificial turf, but a lot of people seem to be throwing around plastic carpet, it just seems like that's definitely some anti-artificial turf rhetoric. That's not technically what it is. We certainly can call it that, but you know, that's definitely, it's being used intentionally, and I just don't want to make the clarification because it's a different thing. And I don't have a lot of, and I'm a fan of artificial turf. I don't know a lot of information about the environmental impact. I would be curious about like a comparison of the environmental impact of a artificial turf surface as opposed to a concrete and steel building like we just built downtown. Is that getting similar attention as far as the negative impact on the environment, or are there underlying factors in this field that are causing people to use artificial turf rhetoric? So if there's information available, and the public probably would want to know that too, does it hurt us more than a steel and concrete building that I didn't hear anybody complaining about? Just
to be clear,
just
we had
curious.
nothing to do with building.
No, I know, but it seems like this is, you know.
Yes.
We'd like to get accurate information about that before we all decide yes, this is our environment, that's all.
Thank you. Congratulations on having a baby that can sleep through a board meeting. So I have opened up the agenda, and I just want to tell the board that I published this, and I did not make an addition at the beginning, a change. I did not know until Steve brought it to me in the mid-meeting. And the agenda item is to reopen the discussion of tabled motion regarding the addition of a natural grass option to Natowich Field Turf RFP. And so I think if we take action on that now, it's action that we know the community is interested in, that we did not warn properly on the agenda. I'm sorry, I didn't know. And I didn't add it as the first item of business, which is our other option under open meeting law. And we have actually actively, I believe, told people that we would not be looking at estimates or moving forward with this. We were just going to do the RFP to add natural grass, and that's what is reflected in the agenda. So I'm just doing my due diligence as a board to keep us all out of trouble. So I've lost track. Is there a motion on the table about taking action tonight on this?
We had tabled another motion from last time.
Right, so
that
we-
motion no longer seems to apply.
Right.
So.
So we could withdraw the motion of the addition of the natural grass option since that's been done in the estimate. So it's kind of a dead motion, you're right.
Because we're not getting RFPs right now, I guess.
Right.
There are other, at the same time, he had a motion on top of that motion which we voted for.
Right, I'm making that call. That motion's,
That's done.
that's done. We're back up to adding natural grass option, which doesn't seem like a motion we even need to have at this point. Because we're not getting RFPs for, we're probably not, we may go forward and get an RFP for natural grass, who knows, but we got cost estimates. So I guess I need a motion. I can withdraw, I think I made the motion about the natural grass option based on discussion that we had in the board level, so I will withdraw that motion, that tabled motion. That deals with this item on the agenda as it stands. Do we want to schedule another meeting so that we can make sure that communications go out? I would prefer to do it after Buildings and Grounds meets so that we could have some time to, and invite the whole board and the public obviously to a committee meeting, but so just we have a little time to think about it because it is a Buildings and Grounds committee issue, I would think, Sean?
Finance, yeah.
Finance and Buildings and Grounds is part of finance, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're gonna meet on the October 2nd, but, yeah, sounds like it might be prudent to have a separate meeting just to deal with this issue.
Yes, I agree. So there's a motion, I guess I hear a motion on the table to schedule a meeting, and that's my favorite thing, to schedule a meeting with this crowd. Schedule a separate meeting just to discuss the Natowich Field option sheet. And I will do that right after I call the Famolari family. I will send out an email, scheduling email to the board and to the administration and to high school staff. It cannot happen this week at this point because it's too late for us to warn a meeting for Friday.
So motion should be, you said discuss, but meaning the motion would be to decide.
To decide,
on
yes.
something.
Yes, sorry.
I mean, we want to be more specific than
Yes.
something, but to decide what we're
Right.
requesting them to actually do.
Yes.
Do we need a motion for that?
We don't need a motion for that. I'm going to do that. I don't think we need a formal motion for that.
Can I have a point of clarification?
Sure.
So since he made a motion to add to the motion that I made last time, how would his motion still be?
It's a great question. I'm withdrawing the part of the motion to,
okay, just
for the addition of the natural grass option. Did you get that, Tim?
No, you lost me somewhere.
So I am withdrawing the addition of the natural grass option from the original motion. The motion to have me call the Famolari Field is still on the table. Wow, that was the longest agenda item to withdraw and to not end up with anything. Is there any other unfinished business? I don't think so. So I didn't have an ad at the beginning. So we have we have 3 executive sessions under 1 VSA 313. You can all stay, we're going next door. Under 1 VSA 313, I want to invite Steve Perrin into our first executive session to discuss academic record suspension or discipline of a student which is not subject to public records review. I would like to invite Carrie Amadon into executive session 2. Come on down to discuss labor relations agreements with employees. And then I would also like to invite Lyle and Frank into, might as well come for all of them, Frank. And then also for the appointment of an employee. All those in favor of, I need a 60% majority here. Aye. Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, we're going into executive session. We'll be back. We are rising from executive session at 9:33. So I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of administration of Steve Perrin, principal of BUHS, in the first executive session matter.
So moved.
Thank you, Anne. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. All those in favor of accepting the recommendation of Steve Perrin, UHS principal, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. On the second executive session item, which was the negotiation of contracts with employees, I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the administration.
So moved.
Thank you, David. Second. Thank you, Ann. All those in favor of the motion to accept the recommendation of the administration, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And on the third item, I knew I was going to lose it.
Personnel.
Personnel, for the appointment of personnel, I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the administration.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ann. All those in favor of the motion to accept the recommendation of the administration for the appointment of an employee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Whew. The next item, on to new business. Whew. The next item is a quick action item that came out of our SU board meeting at the suggestion of Sean Murphy, that because Vernon has been such a long-standing partner and up until about a year ago was a member of the BUHS board, and it is important that we still have the opportunity to hear from Vernon board members when we're discussing BUHS matters. I wanted to just bring it up with the board that we had spoken at the SU level and wanted to get endorsement from the board that we would invite, when we are doing BUHS centered discussions such as budgeting or policy work, that we would invite Vernon to come in an advisory way, not as a voting member, we cannot do that, but come in just so that we can have a member of the Vernon board conveying the information back and forth, and we keep that relationship that has worked so well for all of our communities for 60-something years. So I'm not sure we need a motion for that particularly, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that when we're discussing these things, we'd have Vernon at the table. They aren't able to take a vote, but they would be, we take their input as if they were still kind of with us in discussion. Maybe there's somebody that can take that back to the Vernon board in the room.
I think I can do that.
We're wearing a lot of hats. Item B, under new business, the PreK partnership agreements. We have some action needed. You guys know the drill?
Yes,
Lyle,
we
take it away.
have the Garland School and Susie's Little Peanuts, who are now accepting children from William Southeast, so we need to accept them as pre-K partners.
I would entertain a motion to, I think I signed that, or is the whole board?
I think
Oh, you and Tim.
Christina and maybe Tim.
The board to authorize the chair and the clerk to sign the pre-K partnership agreements with the Garland School, and I gotta say this, Susie's Little Peanuts.
So moved.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sean. All those in favor of approving the pre-K partnerships, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The pre-K partnerships have been approved. Item C, Act 250, School Impact Questionnaires. Lyle, you're up.
We have two requests for school impact questionnaires. One from the Brattleboro Outing Club. They actually purchased the tiny house and they are going to be using it for a warming shed at the outing club. It would have absolutely no impact on the school system at all. So I would ask that you would agree to sign this for the Brattleboro Outing Club.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think Sean seconded that. You can take Sean. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the Act 250 School Impact Questionnaires, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays
And we have one from Sugar Mountain Holdings in Dummerston. It is estimated that possibly there would be an increase of 10 students over the next 5 years based on new jobs created. And I have signified that it would not impact our schools negatively.
Quite the
We
opposite.
would love them to bring those students to us.
Where is this?
Do your boards,
Maple Valley?
It is Maple Valley Brewery.
can anybody but
I
Brattleboro's
assume at
boards
Maple
ever
Valley.
get these things? These
Oh, they
250
finally
studies?
get it
'Cause
going.
we get them all, every
We've
time
got
somebody
it
wants to
with
build
you.
a house, we get them.
We got them at VHS and we got them in Putnam.
So moved.
So moved, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the approval to sign, the school impact questionnaire? Ready for the question? All those in favor of authorizing the board chair, I believe it doesn't say.
I just figured you'd do it. It's at the very bottom of that.
It doesn't say, it just says name.
Yeah, it says name and position, so.
Okay, authorizing the board chair to sign the Maple Valley Brewery School Impact Questionnaire. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. So this next more conversation, which probably shouldn't have at 9:39, is just a little bit about agenda changes, and I had a concern from a board member for the WRCC walk around that it didn't appear that it appeared to be an agenda change, and I think it's part of our cultural change because we always hand it over to administration when it said administrative time, and so I just wanted to, and we had talked about spending the administrative time doing a walkthrough in every building because a lot of us aren't familiar with buildings that we haven't had governance work over. So I just wanted to check with the board to make sure that the board's all on board with that original plan, and that for the foreseeable future, when we're new in a building, we'll take a walk around during the administrative time for 20 or 30 minutes or whatever. I love the walk around, especially when we have 4-hour meetings, but that would have been good tonight. But that we have that opportunity to hear from the boards. And on the first one, I wasn't sure. It was so early in the school year. I wasn't sure that the WRCC would be up and running and ready to have that late night walk around with the boards. So I apologize if that was a heads up. But I just wanted to check with the board if that seems reasonable. I don't need a motion. I just need head nodding or, okay. And then another thought that we'd hoped to do during the board retreat is to move to a consent agenda, which helps us move things the minutes. So instead of doing individual motions and approving it, that we can group approval of the minutes. You can still ask questions on the consent agenda. It doesn't mean that you're not prohibited doing that, but we would group things like warrants, potentially minutes. Those are the big ones, right? That would go into the, yeah, those are the big ones that generally go into a consent agenda, just to sort of move a meeting. It might take a few minutes off of the meeting instead of waiting for motions and firsts and then my annoying seconds that I like. So does that seem like a reasonable path to pursue for the board? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I've watched everybody has these consent agendas. You can ask questions, but what if you want to not vote for one of them and the other? Do you take them out? Because I think I've seen them take one, you know, I don't want to vote for yes for the warrant, so I take it out of the consent agenda?
Fabulous question. Do you have experience with that, Sean? We never used a consent agenda.
I think in my experience you do, you take it out. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, actually, I don't have a memory of that specifically.
The Finance Committee approved the warrants. We agreed to enter consent agenda, and at the end of consent agenda, we agreed to approve it, but that was all consent agenda. I do not recall us ever taking out a line item.
I think I've seen the State Board of Education do this.
Okay.
And that's why but I never really understood what from watching the high school board. I never knew what a consent agenda was.
I'll call Clarence, the incredible parliamentarian. He might have some idea about how
I
to
think if a document within that needs to be edited, you can remove it, do a full consent agenda approval, and then make an individual edit and change and something.
Thanks for the question. I'll look into
I'm
it.
sorry for the question.
That's a great question because it's going to happen sometime and then I'm not going to know and everybody's going to be mad at me because they don't get home by 10 o'clock.
Christina?
Yes.
Funny. So I'm on a board that does this, and the practice that we have, which I think is fairly standard, is that the consent agenda is listed in advance, and if a board member has a concern or wants it to be pulled out because they can't vote for it, They would contact the board chair in advance, and that would be done. So then at the meeting, it would be, this is the consent list, we are removing this item for discussion and separate vote.
Awesome.
But it has to be done in advance of the meeting.
I love that. I love everything we can do in advance. So it sounds like I see heads nodding, or maybe you're just nodding off. So regular meeting scheduling, we were going to explore other options besides Wednesday. And I can see that maybe I should table that until the next meeting.
Haven't we done that several times?
No, Tim didn't have a schedule.
Oh.
We tried to do it and Tim didn't have a schedule. No, I don't mean to throw you under the rug, buddy.
Well, I think I raised an objection because I missed my book group tonight. Thank you very much.
If you do want to discuss it, I'm not sure I really can do other nights other than Wednesday.
Okay.
Certainly, I think the other nights that were like up for discussion, I think it was Thursday in particular.
Okay, I'll just give up my book group. It's only been a life-changing experience.
Change it again.
Any chance your book group will
No, they
try
don't want to.
They don't, it's not for you.
No, that I'm the only male in the whole group. All my female friends.
Well, what about, the other Wednesdays? Well, the other option is I can rethink the VSBA. We can do other ones, and maybe we could appoint somebody else to be the VSBA representative, because I can't maybe do all this. So we could do the alternate Wednesdays, so if I give up the VSBA seat.
The problem with that is it doesn't, the first and third are perfect in terms of timing.
Right.
And we've already scheduled the programmatic committee
Everything
and
around.
the...
Well, we wouldn't have changed it for this. He's got another month
the
before his life
sustainability are the
changes.
second and fourth Wednesdays.
Well, we'll continue to consider this. I don't want Sean to miss his life-changing conference. Sorry, Sean. Next agenda items, I think that,
Christina?
yeah, sorry, I'm sorry, Jamie.
I was concerned when I looked at the pattern of meetings that I don't understand what the pattern is, and so I was hoping that there was going to be a Brattleboro, Putney, Dummerston, Guilford meeting, so that within a 2-month period, every town would have a meeting. So is there a pattern I'm missing?
Yes, there is. So the first Wednesday of the month is always at BU6 in the Cusick room. And then the second Wednesday meeting, which is the third Wednesday, we're rotating alphabetically. So Academy, Dummerston, Green, Guilford, Oak, Putney. So it'll be in town, out of town, in town, out of town, in town, out of town.
They had to do that to meet state requirements.
You have to do that?
Well,
We but we want to get to all the schools.
We needed
Just because it means that more often than not, we're driving.
Yeah.
So it just, from driving 7 minutes to driving all the way here so often, I'm just trying to understand how that works for the towns that are being disenfranchised through forced merger.
That's why that's why we're doing it, so that every school gets a chance to have the meeting, to host a meeting.
And then the one that happens at BUHS is BAM-centric, BUHS-centric, and WRCC. So we're covering 3 schools with that one, and we needed to have a regularly scheduled board meeting at time and location. So that's kind of one of the really stinky things about open meeting law, when you actually put it in place, is your intent to be open to everybody is thwarted by the requirement that we have a regular time and meeting place.
So there's no way to make it a 4. Putney, Guilford, Brattleboro, Dummerston rotation. Not legally.
I mean,
No, we could.
We could.
What about where in Brattleboro?
Yeah,
I think you could just keep rotating, because it would be every 4 weeks, and then it rotates, and then it rotates, and then it rotates every time.
Well, I think there's multiple schools and we're trying to make the meeting be about the school we're in. So there's 3 elementary schools and BAMS and BUHS and WRCC.
I don't want to extend the meeting tonight, I just wanted to try to understand.
Yeah, so that was kind of our trying to weigh.
Okay. If you guys are trying to create equity, I understand. I just was trying to understand what that
how that looked.
You can talk later if you want, Jamie. I can make it make sense.
So I think our next agenda item, next meeting scheduled will be to really primarily, except for emergencies that come up, will be to decide on what direction we're going to recommend the turf field goes in.
I just had a lights on moment based on what Jamie said. I remember at like one of the first meetings I had asked about Brattleboro live stream, and we had gotten a price quote and decided, I think we moved that if there was a very important meeting, we would live stream it so that people from other towns, wherever this meeting is going to happen, which is yet to be determined, could live stream it, and then they could type questions to us. There would have to be somebody who was, monitoring the chat. So if we're going to be having this special meeting about turf, that might be the good time to activate the live stream.
I think there are open meeting law issues with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we did it for the forum, but that wasn't.
Right.
Oh, so
That
we
was
can't.
regular meeting.
We talked about doing that, but we can't do that.
Well, I know a few years ago, one of the select board members was, people were writing to him during the meeting with ideas and things to say at the meeting, and that's contrary to open meeting law.
So if we had a third-party person who was saying the messages, nobody from the board would be able to read them, but they would all be given at the same time?
Oh, that I don't know about.
I'm just saying that we had said we would live stream it so people could actually participate real time.
Right.
If, for example, they couldn't find childcare and we're in Dummerston and the meeting was in Guilford, I don't know where this meeting's going to be, they could, it might not be a good idea. I'm just saying we did talk about that and we said that for important meetings, and this strikes me as one.
So communications.
For an information session, we could do that, like the BHS board held budget. And I suppose we could, but if we're going to vote on anything, I don't think we're allowed to do it that week.
Okay.
I'll look it up for you, Emily, and see if I always have that tab open right in my page, so, and see if I can figure out if that's doable, and that could be something the communications council considers.
Should we, so I guess my question would be, are we scheduling the meeting? When we talked about this turf field thing, that was a special meeting.
So special meeting
We need
means
to
something.
decide that. If it's going to be,
okay.
if it's going to be on our agenda, we can't have anything else except.
Right, that's it,
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a separate from our regularly scheduled meeting. So the special meeting is like a different thing, legally speaking.
But if we're going to, in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the turf, then we won't have other things on that agenda unless we have, if we're just going to do it in 2 weeks.
And so I'll do that via email tomorrow and see when people are available in the next week and a half, so we can get that meeting scheduled.
And so you're talking about a special meeting to talk about turf?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that we had decided, I talked
Well,
about that.
if we can't get availability, then it'll be the next meeting, the next regular scheduled meeting, but my hope is that we could maybe find some time before that, because we got a lot to do. We got like a gazillion warrants to approve.
Well, we also have the mission statements to confirm.
Okay, and so items for next agenda, I have the field, and then I also want to get an update on leadership councils, because we had spoken about the leadership councils as being, for a plethora of reasons, being the provider or the people that could in each facility find childcare options. Although, I don't know, it's great having kids here in my book, but having childcare at the various sites that we're going to be at, and to work on our board mission statement, as well as the committee mission statements. And I think that is all.
Eventually, we need to talk about VSBA dues again.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. We tabled that till after the regional meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, we tabled it after the regional meeting.
Regional meeting. I couldn't remember if it was the business meeting or the regional meeting. Okay. It was a question, so which meeting we tabled it to. Okay, is there any other new business?
One tiny piece of new business. Since my son graduated from Putney Central, one of the ways I've been able to keep up with what's going on is by getting the school newsletter. And it came to me over the weekend, and I thought, why don't we all get all the school news, like by email or not? So I think, I'm not suggesting we kill lots of trees or anything, but yeah, that it really has been a good way to keep up with, yeah, and we're doing this, and there's this academic competition, and there's this special event. And I would have asked Lyle if she could direct someone to make that happen. Herb had to jump through a great number of hoops to do that for me. It was very complicated because I wasn't attached to a student. So let's not make the individual principals jump through those hoops. After he graduated, you're no longer attached to a student at primary school, and that's when.
But you're speaking of each school sending out one, right?
Yeah, I mean.
So that we would all be up on some of Guilford or Putney, Dulles,
Yeah.
so that's.
Yeah, look at cute pictures of they have cute pictures on ours. I don't know if you guys have cute pictures on yours. Look at cute pictures of cute kids, cute art projects, and have a general idea what's going on.
That's a great idea, and so I wonder if Lyle can make that happen, and it sure beats reading warrants, right, people?
Yeah.
I like reading warrants.
I like reading warrants, but we got a lot of them to read.
Now that I know how to
Oh,
walk the
you can rotate, excellent. So, any comment on items not on the agenda? Ruby McAdoo.
Hi, Ruby McAdoo.
Thanks for waiting.
I just wanted to give you a very, very, very brief update on the child care, aftercare situation in Putney. We are still in emergency crisis mode, and most of our families are covering themselves amongst themselves. We're trying to find, to the best of our ability, help for the few families who are really in a pinch and it might be impacting their job, but we're having a hard time. That being said, Herb is really committing himself to developing a program, and I can't really speak to any update. Lyle may or may not know it. I think that he wants to not speak too loudly until he has something firm in place, but I think there is some hope, some glimmer of hope that a program will be developed, and that's great. Once we have more information, we'll give it to you. The only other thing I wanted to tell you is that a group of us, including Herb and Marissa, who's the counselor there, have started to meet to discuss the 21st Century Grant option or any other grant options. We didn't, Marissa reached out to the other area counselors and really got no information about other schools and their experience, which was kind of a bummer because we were hoping we could learn something from that, but we have a few other clues of people to track down. But I do think that there could be room for a discussion at some point after all your turf discussions are done and you have time about a more global look at how we as a school board, a merged school board, can support all of the area schools in funding for whatever special projects they have and special ways in which they want to enhance, particularly around care in the after school hours and also in the summer. So anyway, that's it. Just a little update.
Thank you, Ruby.
There you go.
Oh,
I'm going to be here until my kid has aftercare.
Well, I'll put you on the agenda.
There are two people that have been hired. We have to go through background checks before they can start. We can't have people that haven't gone through background checks with kids. They have been into the office to fill out that paperwork, so it is in the pipeline.
So now, is this a program that we're implementing at Putney, or is this that we are funding now?
This, I don't know where the funding is coming from. I will find that out.
I was told it's a self-sustaining program because we all pay for it.
Okay,
I
so
think parents, yeah, it'd be like why Aspire was.
Because I asked the same question.
just because we are at the cap, and everything that's happening is pushing us above the cap, and that is not sustainable from a fiscal standpoint. So I just want to be conscious of.
But I think just because this is on the record, I think one of the reasons that Herb hasn't been speaking too loudly about it is that even if the background checks go like that, and they're like perfect candidates, we're still not even remotely thinking that anything's going to be in place before earliest Thanksgiving, at earliest. And so I think that the idea of thinking about, oh great, we have this option, wonderful, it's going to happen. We still have some work to do to set that up, and I don't even think we're at that stage of talking about that.
I have something to add to this.
Sure.
Since Putney Central.
Sorry, can you give your name?
Liz Adams from Putney. Since Putney Central already has had an aftercare program, you can request a waiver from the state to have to go through all those licensing requirements again and then that way the program would be eligible for subsidy. I've done these kind of things.
I'm leaving it to Lyle and her to research any kind of process around that.
I'll let him know, because he probably doesn't know.
Thank you for bringing your childcare expertise to the table, Liz. Any other public comment? Any other business from the board? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:59. Thank you, Emily. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All those in favor? Nays, abstentions.
Oh, thank you. Something happened to that.